Lincoln X-ray 985 should come back up next.
So you had 2000 Patrick Spalding.
10-4. If you can just put a little note in something like that, I might not be leaving a note on a vehicle as well. I can remove it.
Rockingham 505. 505 intercepting militant case for Athens. Complainant, soon to be ex, slashed her tires and has made threatening comments to her. She's concerned he might return.
Yeah, forgive that to 32.
10-4. 532, you're assigned to a vandalism case in Athens. Did you copy the 505?
Yeah, 4. Look at that.
21.
No, 3 in Depot Street. Truck boy entering 5.
That was 435.
10-4.
10-4.
You go 43 again.
143.
You go with that 43 you had. I didn't hear any, but I had jump looks like we do.
10-4, I just wanted to know if you should be put back 76 to Cabana Circle or to the subject's address.
Yeah, I'll be 23 back on that town property case, and I'll be 76 to the Williams Road address to see if I can find the owner.
10-4. 449, 1120.
And 449, 1121, thank you.
10-4.
Code 4. 4.
Rockingham 535.
You have a great college.
535.
Should be. Heading over for a woman who walked into a house. I'll flight up that way.
Caller is now been able to close the front door. She's now pounding on the door, trying to get in still. She's now applied to blow up on her hair, got tie-dye shirt on, and number 21 is on.
We have separation. Inboard now. She's right.
All right. Hey, guys. Good evening. I don't think I need this. I can take this off. Much nicer without it. Good to see you guys. Thanks for being here. This is going to be a take it easy show, so just sit back and enjoy the ride. None of us is on trial related to this case or any of the cases that we're discussing. So let's not try to get too riled up. Let's just enjoy. It's a beautiful night out. And we'll talk about the case, and we'll talk about a lot of things that have come up in recent days and what's coming up over the next week in the case. So just saying hi to people. Lori, good to see you. Tom, thank you for being here. Jill, good to see you. Maui Swift, always good to see you guys. Jackie could use some taking it easy. Yes, let's all do some taking it easy. I want to talk about a few things that have happened over the last few days, but in a take it easy kind of way. Oh, before I get to that, just an announcement. So somebody reached out to me and was unhappy that they got some kind of a message that the membership for the channel automatically renewed or something like that. The thing is I don't have anything to do with that. That's YouTube. And when you get monetized, you have to set up that thing. And I set it at the minimum levels. I feel bad about what happened to her, but I didn't send out that message. I have no control of any of that. I don't think there's anything I can do to cancel a membership or refund someone or anything like that. I think it was only $1.99, but I don't know. I mean, people have to cancel it on their own. Like I said, it's only a couple bucks. And if you're not interested, we are going to have to try to figure out, now that more people are signing up, how to make this interesting to people or useful to people. If you should get something for your membership, right? So I guess we'll try to figure out how to do shows. Maybe if we can get a separate number to do this, to do call-in shows like we did. I don't know. We'll try to figure out some way to do it. Rome wasn't built in a day, and Yellow Cottage takes a while to get all these things down. I'm a boomer, as you guys know, so the technology stuff takes me a while to work through it. Now, when you're doing a true crime channel, or I would guess if you're doing anything that is in the public, you're discussing public affairs, politics, medicine, science, whatever, but things where there are opinions. One of the things that you, I think, want to do, and I try to do regularly, is look in the mirror and question your own motives, your own style, behavior, opinions, everything. It's not something you should be doing once in a while. It should be something you should be doing all the time, especially in a world where now, like this, where this case is so prominent and opinions are so divided. Talk about the Karen Reed case, of course. And there's so much going on in social media. It can be easy in social media to say something that could have been worded better, or maybe would have been better off not saying at all, things like that, right? And sometimes that's true too when you're doing a lot of live shows. Maybe sometimes you say something that an editor would say, maybe you want to rethink that, right? So, but that's part of doing things that are live. You're going to say things. I'm not saying that I have any regrets about anything that I've said recently, but over the course of the last year, there were certainly mistakes that I made. And you're always going to be trying to look at yourself in the mirror and say, is what you're saying, is it truly objective? Is it goal-oriented, or is it something that you really is more selfish and you just are not self-aware enough to realize that what you're saying is selfish? So I do that. And I promise you, I will always do that. It's something that's the way I've always lived my life. When I owned a bar, if you're having trouble with an employee, you question yourself. Are your motives selfish? Are you handling it the right way? It's something that you have to do. I think it's important. And I do try to do that. Now, I had a guest on this past Thursday, whose name is Bill Nocera. I've had him on before. I will have him on again. I explained my reasons why in the past. I've always explained them, and I explained them again before that show. Now, I understand why some people are uncomfortable with that guest. And this is why I explained my reasons for having him on the show. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit now. But up front, I do fully understand why some people don't like that particular guest. Not because of anything he's done on the show, but from what he's done in his past. And so let me make the case for you, and you don't have to accept it, but just let me make it. Give me a chance to make it. Now, there may be some other channels that might take my words out of context, but that's a whole other subject. There was a case that I did a topic on this. So a couple of years ago, maybe I think it was 2 years ago, I did a couple of videos on this a killer named Peter Madsen. Peter Madsen is known as, I think the series on Netflix was The Submarine Killer. And this was, I tell you, of all the cases, this is the one that kept me up at night. I mean, literally, because I'm not a person that gets scared at horror movies and things like that. There was something about this case, and it wasn't even anything graphically displayed in the Netflix documentary, but just knowing what happened, it really bothered me. But it's also a reason why I think it's important to talk to killers. Okay. So in the Peter Madsen case, this guy was in his late 30s or early 40s, I think probably early 40s. And he was an inventor, a guy that had become an inventor building rockets and then submarines as a young boy. And he just kind of continued that. And he developed a following of people that were very committed to him because they believed in the projects. They believed he wanted to, for instance, he wanted to build a rocket that could carry a human being to space, which is a really difficult thing to do if you're just kind of a backyard inventor. This guy managed to develop a good, piece of property. This was in, I think it was in Denmark. It's in a European country. I forget which one. It might have been the Netherlands. And so Peter Madsen harbored a dark secret that he was secretly involved in clubs that are apparently pretty, I don't want to say popular, but they're much more mainstream in Europe, especially with the aristocratic classes. Some people that might have a taste for this stuff, but sadomasochism, torture, and stuff like that. This was a part of his personality that was unknown, though. And the people that worked for him were very committed to the ideal of building a rocket that could take a man to space, a rocket that's run by a small group like this, a private group. Now, while he was getting into trouble, though, and the reason he was getting into the reason he was getting into trouble, the project wasn't going well, and he was running out of money. And this was all really, coincidentally, really well documented for the documentary that Netflix did, because there was an independent journalist, a woman, who had been filming with them for a period of weeks or maybe months, filming a documentary on this Peter Madsen. And she was there with him the day when Peter Madsen finally showed his true face. And the interview was horrible because she doesn't understand. She had no way of knowing doing the interview, but he says in it, he's sitting right across from her, and they're in the warehouse where all his projects are going on. It's just the two of them because they were running out of money and they couldn't really bring in workers that day. And he's sitting there saying, there's this type of person that could be sitting right across from you who secretly has murderous desires and has no feelings of empathy for other human beings. And this person is known as a psychopath. And he says, you could be sitting right across from this person and you wouldn't know it. Now, he's trying to portray at that moment to the interviewer that he's talking about someone else, but he was really talking about himself. And shortly after that, he arranged to have a young reporter. Don't worry, I'm not going to give you any details, any graphic details. But he had a young reporter who was engaged. She was an independent journalist who had published for the New York Times and other major things. She was in her late 20s. And she and her fiance were actually just about to move to Hong Kong. But he got in touch with her and he said, if you want to do an interview, I'll do it with you today. Come on out and I'll take you out on the sub. So her fiance brought her there, dropped her off, and she got out in the sub. Now the last image of her is the submarine is out into the harbor. and she and Peter Mattson are on the conning tower, I think it's called. And that's her fiance taking that pictures. Now, moments later, it got far enough out. They closed the hatch. The submarine submerged. And he began an hours-long process of binding her, torturing her, dismembering her, and killing her. Now, when she didn't come home, there was a long search for her, and her boyfriend got out, the police, and no one knew what happened to the sub. Well, then a couple of days later, the sub puts out an SOS, and it says it's sinking and it needs to be rescued, and that's all filmed because it's an SOS. So the media was there, and you can see Peter Mattson being rescued off the sub as it's about to go down, and then being brought on shore, and people are asking him questions. Where's the woman? I forget her name. And again, it's not because I don't care about the victims that I forget her name. This was a couple years ago that I did this research in this video. So he changed his story multiple times. He initially said, well, I let her off on the dock last night. That was a lie. And then later on, he admitted that she was accidentally injured by the closing of the hatch, and he didn't know what to do. Now they brought out divers, and they found several bags with her dismembered body put in these bags. And so eventually he was convicted of murder, and he was sentenced to life. Yes, the documentary, Nicole, is on Netflix. Yes. And you take different things from these cases, right? But one of the things that happens in this documentary is, now this was only, I think, maybe 2017 or something like that when this happened. I'm not sure the exact year, so it wasn't that long ago. Now, in Europe, sentenced to life in most of these European countries means no more than 15 years. They have an extremely liberal outlook on life and understanding of the world. And they believe that everybody, every single human being, no matter how horrific their crime, is entitled to be rehabilitated and to get another chance. So he'll be out of jail. Probably 6, 7, 8 years. I forget exactly what's left on his sentence. Now, interestingly, while he was in jail, he actually escaped. But it's again, it's horrifying to me looking at, they got video of him escaping. It doesn't even look like a prison. It looks like a shopping mall. I didn't see any guard towers, any walls, any barbed wire. And when he escapes, this guy comes out. I don't know if he's a guard or if he was the warden. I mean, he looked like Bill Gates, and he's like, Peter, come back. Peter, come back. This is a killer, a brutal killer who killed this woman for no reason. He had just met her. It was because he had dreamed of torturing and dismembering a victim like that. Now, this is why you talk to killers and to people who have talked to killers, who have got to know killers, because there's a whole continent there of Europe that is largely naive, or at least their political system is naive as to how these guys think. They don't understand that these monsters that have those kind of urges and fantasies that they would have developed them since adolescence, they cannot be rehabilitated. They can't be. Now, this was already my belief from studying, reading books on psychopathy and reading books on these crimes. And obviously, you can watch shows like Mindhunter or read the book Mindhunter. If you don't let some ideological principle get in the way and you just have a realistic understanding of how these guys work, you know that they cannot be rehabilitated. And they should never be allowed access to citizens again, where they can kill again. Now, Bill Nocera is not that kind of killer. What he did was horrible. He deserves his sentence. And I've said that on every show. He 100% deserves his sentence. He was 18 years old, and he planned, so it was premeditated, to kill the mother of his girlfriend. Now, there are different things you can find as to why. She was pregnant. I think maybe the mother didn't like Bill, so wanted her to get an abortion. but it may have been a financial interest there too. I don't know, but it was a horrific crime, and I've talked about it on the channel. Bill used a martial arts baton to kill the woman. It was a brutal slaying. And Bill was a big athletic guy who was also a martial artist who had fought in the ring. It was a very good martial artist. He was sentenced to death, rightly so. He served 39 years on San Quentin. Last year, his sentence was reduced to life in prison, and he was transferred to Corcoran. It's not a fun place. Every time I'm on the phone with him, you can hear prisoners screaming in the background. It's not about whether or not Bill deserves forgiveness or redemption. He's not ever getting out of jail. When I talk to Bill, it's about trying to learn things that might be useful. Now, if I'm going to, obviously, I am not an FBI profiler. So what I can do personally with the information or what people watching this show can do with it is limited. It'd be much more useful if 60 Minutes did a show on Bill Nocera or Joe Rogan and talk to someone like that, where they could maybe apply some of that evidence more usefully, or FBI profilers, because like the FBI profilers, the show Mindhunter is about these guys the FBI profilers going to interview serial killers and getting these guys to open up about what goes on inside their head. And it's a great show, and it was invaluable. The work done by John Douglas and some of the other guys on the original FBI profilers. However, a limitation is those guys, those killers know they're talking to a profiler. They're not going to talk. They're not going to necessarily tell the same things to a profiler, to someone for the FBI, to anyone in law enforcement, or a psychologist or a warden or whatever. They might open up in different ways to someone that's in prison. And that's what Bill set himself to doing at some point many years ago, was getting to know these guys and finding out what made them tick. Now, that doesn't mean that automatically that Bill will have useful insights. People have to decide for themselves if they listen to it. And to a certain extent, you have to trust me, because he's someone that I talk to a lot of times on the phone and talking about doing these shows and picking his brain before I decided to go with it. So again, you have to try. You listen to me, those that are here, those that aren't here to hate, right? And you obviously here, you may think that I sometimes have something to add to the conversation. Now, not everybody's going to agree with that. That's fine. But if you trust my judgment on someone, this is an intelligent guy who has insights. And just generally, a lot of his observation and his philosophy about these guys also happen to ring true with my own thoughts. I do not believe that someone who has developed urges in adolescence, fantasies that involve trying to harm someone else, to harm a child or to harm somebody innocent, torture them, there's no cure for that. That's something that does, and that's not something that they suddenly come down with like a new condition in their 40s. So when you have someone like Richard Allen, for example, in Delphi, who seems to have killed for the first time at the age of 47. Well, he didn't begin having, now, to someone to kill those two girls, Abby and Libby, like he didn't do that on a whim. This is something that he would have been thinking about since adolescence, since he first started developing his own urges and tastes for what he got off on. And that's important to understand that. Jeffrey Dahmer, BTK, Ted Bundy, they develop these urges at the time of adolescence, these fantasies. And they become more sophisticated over time. And normally they act on them by the time of their 20s. In fact, the common age that they might first kill seems to be 27. But so in their mid to late 20s, that's when they may do other precursor actions like peeping Tom stuff. And some of them start earlier. Jeffrey Dahmer's first kill was at the age of 18. But a lot of times they hold off until their 20s. But all that time, these fantasies are percolating inside their head. They're growing, the urges are growing stronger. And almost inevitably, they're going to act on them at some point. But occasionally you get someone that doesn't act on it until their 40s, like Richard Allen. And the question is to understand why they held off, why they didn't act on them sooner. And when you look at these things, you can develop insights. Now, to me, back looking at the Delphi murders before they captured Richard Allen, before Richard Allen was a suspect, and I got into that case late. I didn't start researching it until the September of 2022. And we knew that it was a very small town in Delphi, and there had been no similar killings in recent decades in that area. So this seemed like it was, and we knew the killer had to be almost certainly a local, because to know his way around the Monon High Bridge Trail, that takes a local. And so the police had said as much, the FBI had profiled as much, that this guy was a local. But yet the population is under 2,000. And the little villages around that are even smaller. They all have populations of around 40. So it's a very small pool of people that you're working with. So, and witness descriptions, though, were that this guy was in his 40s. Why would someone first kill for the 40s? Well, this is why you study this stuff. And you might say, well, Kevin, you're not an FBI profiler, so who gives a shit what you say? Okay, fine. That's fine. But you don't know who watches these channels. I do know that there are people in law enforcement that watch this. And it's not my fault. I can't sit here and say, well, I don't have 200,000 people watching this, so I should therefore stop trying to research this stuff. No, that's not how my mind works. And I knew that when I had Bill on each time, I would probably lose a certain amount of subscribers. So it was a net loss for me to have Bill on this channel. But my commitment to knowledge and to learning is more important than trying to grow subscribers. Yeah, we want to grow subscribers. Of course we do. If we had more subscribers, I could get better guests. But to me, the primary driving force is to learn and to understand, and in making something like this public, to provide a format that other people and the good people that we have in chat, for them to look at this. Peter Madsen in Europe should never get out of jail. He will kill again when he does. All right. So when I say he should never get out of jail, it's not because it has nothing to do with me saying this guy needs to be thrown into the pits of hell for eternity. Yes, he does. But no, the reason is because you don't want him to do it again. And there is no cure for what ails these people. And this is something that Bill has said on every show, because he got to know Bill is not a serial killer. He killed one person for selfish reasons. It was horrific, but he doesn't have urges to kill. But he spent a lot of time with Richard Ramirez and many other guys like this, and he knows that they do. And so if there's any message that he has really hit over and over again, multiple times on every time we talked and on every show, is that these guys are monsters. They're born what they are, and they should never get out of jail. And so to me, I think it's useful for the public to hear that from somebody who has spent 39 years in jail with them on San Quentin, who's been in jail for 41 years, and someone who won't get out of jail again. Now, people might think I'm platforming him. Okay, fine. But this is a very small platform, and he already is on larger platforms. He has an agent. He has a publisher. He has I forget if it's Netflix or where it is, but there's a series coming out on him next year. He has another book coming out. I'm not really platforming him. I'm not driving anything up for him. My channel's too small. So if it was bigger, maybe I would have to make that decision. Am I platforming him? Shouldn't I? But even then, I probably would do it, because he's not getting out of jail. It's not in any way glorifying his crimes or the crimes of the people that he talks to, the killers that he's lived with. It's helping to shed information that is useful to our understanding, to the public, to our understanding of how these guys think. And even though my contribution to that is tiny because the channel is so small, it's still a tiny contribution. And that's all I try to do with the channel, is increase our own understanding by getting insights. And so For instance, an interesting part of the show the other night, he talked about Brian Kohberger. Now, I don't know if he's right on this, but it was interesting to hear about. So, Brian Kohberger, the key piece of evidence was when he murdered the two girls on the 3rd floor, he left the knife sheath on the bed. Now, my assumption on that had been, and I still lean this way, is that he left it there accidentally. And Bill doesn't think that anymore. He thinks it was left there intentionally. Now, it's worth exploring that idea. Brian Kohberger is a graduate student in criminology. So he's a smart guy. How could he make such a terrible mistake? Because DNA was found on that. And this is also where the value of chat is too. So during the show, somebody here in our audience on chat told us, and I haven't had time to look it up, but if it's true, this person pointed out that sheath was cleaned very thoroughly, but there was one spot that was missed, and that's where they found the DNA. So it may be that Brian Kohberger did leave it there on purpose, thinking that nothing would be found on it. I don't know. The way I imagine it is a little bit different. I actually think that these guys, no matter how smart they are, now you look at, say, Ted Bundy was a smart guy, and some of these other guys are smart guys too. And they still, in every case, no matter how many times they've killed, they make mistakes, a lot of mistakes. Mistakes where you go back and look and say, how did you not catch this person? Or how were they so stupid? They're not stupid. But what it is they're in the grip of something, urges produced by their fantasies. These urges are so powerful that in the moments that they're killing or committing the crime, it's very similar to a heroin addict getting his fix. And it's those urges so just dominate their mind that they're not quite in their right head. And that's why they make mistakes. Now, I don't tell you that to say that there's any excuse for what they do. There is not. I'm just trying to describe something. This is as a way of understanding why they might do something so stupid. For example, like leaving behind your knife sheath, and DNA was found on that. Brian Kohberger's DNA was found on that knife sheath. I don't know if he could be convicted without that knife sheath. But Bill's point was that Brian Kohberger had studied similar killings, including, and I can't recall the name of it, but there was, and this was not Ted Bundy, although he did something similar to, I think it was Gainesville. There were murders. I don't know what year it was, how long. I think it was probably a while ago, but it was in Gainesville. It was college kids and college girls, and they were murdered by someone who entered a sorority house. Although, like, Ted Bundy did that too. But this guy had killed with the Gainesville killer had killed with a K-bar knife, just like a knife that's favored by the Marines. And that's also what Kohberger used. So Bill's theory was that this guy was using that knife kind of as a homage to that other killer, and that he left it behind on purpose, kind of as a calling card, because he thought it was clean. Again, I don't know that I would necessarily believe that, but it is an interesting idea worth thinking about. So in the case of the other reason it's worth thinking about is this is something that Bill talked about. This is something that people that study true crime know, but this is also something that attorney Kevin Mahoney talked about with me in an unrelated case. But that sometimes these guys, remember, if you're a serial killer, your mind is warped, okay? To me, I would say they're born with a version of psychopathy. But in any case, without getting too deep into that, their mind is not the same as a normal mind. And one of the things that happens with these guys is they want to tell their story. It's not that they want to go to jail. No. It's not that they have any feelings of guilt or remorse. Absolutely not. And Bill talks about that too. These guys, he has never met a single one of these guys that ever had a feeling of remorse, ever. If anything, they're proud of what they did, but certainly they accept this is who they are, and they have no remorse. So why would you want to talk about it? Because to them, it's a way of reliving it. And to them, it's the pinnacle of their life to be able to get that reaction out of other people, the court, the reporters, the public, the family members. They get off on that. It's an important part of why they do what they do. When you're a psychopath, you get a rush from having that godlike control over other human beings. And so I think it's important to consider those insights and say, is it possible that he did leave that knife sheath behind on purpose? Not because he wanted to get caught, but there's ultimately some part of him that wants to be able to tell his story down the road. It wants to be compared to other serial killers. Again, I still myself believe that he probably just was so in the throes of what he was doing that he dropped it there. But Bill makes a good point. This is why it's worth having. This is why, to me, it's worth having these discussions. All right. And people can not want to listen to it. People in my family that listen to my show for certain topics won't listen to that. I get it. I get it. I understand it. But to me, the importance of advancing our understanding and the public's understanding is what reigns supreme. Now, another thing that was talked about was victims. Getting too far. I don't know what motivated Roberta to do her show. It was clearly not motivated by some actual problem, I don't think, with my guest or my approach. It was very personal and very petty and very catty and very lightweight. Her analysis it was very Glare-esque. It was kind of like, I'm looking for a reason to go after this guy, and here's my chance. So maybe what I'll do. And I'm going to go take things he said and I'm going to distort them. I don't know what her motive is. I've heard a little bit of her channel. It always sounded kind of lightweight to me, but I think she has a nice voice. People enjoyed listening to her. I always treated her with 100% respect. She's been in my chat all the time, and I always treated her with 100% respect. Now, it started a few weeks ago. She started acting strange and catty and attacking every comment that Jen Coffindaffer made. And I was like, this is weird. I'm just going to let it go. And assuming she's having a moment. Roberta, I mean, something's going on. I even reached out to her. She didn't reply to it, but I said, is everything okay? Because I didn't know. You don't know when something is going on with in someone in their life. And then if something happens, it's too late to reach out to them. So for instance, Heels in the Air, who I never had any problem with. So I don't want to confuse that, but we had talked about doing a show together. And I kind of didn't do it just because I thought it might look a little odd having one person on the camera and the other person just doing audio. Now, that was probably a stupid reason, but that was just at the time how I thought. I didn't really know anything about her channel, but she was always great in chat. And then afterwards, she passed, and I felt terrible that I had never done a show with her. I felt really bad. So when I looked at Roberta, not knowing anything about her personally, I was like, I don't know what she's been through. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if she's having a moment. So when she was attacking Jen Coffindaffer every day, I was like, what's going on here? So I just reached out like, hey, I'm here if you need me. She ignored it. But then Kevin Mahoney was on, and she did the same thing, did a whole reaction video to it, and these attacks were lightweight. They weren't like anything that most people would think were serious. They were just catty. It was really weird. Like, really, really? She kept saying that. I was like, all right, what's going on here? And then she came at me this week. So whatever happened personally before that, even though I think it was because I offered some light criticism of Grant Ellis Smith, who had been a guest on our show. And, when I did, a lot of other people said it was after seeing me say that, felt like, yeah, the same way. Like, yeah, what is going on with him? He's saying some very strange things. And of course, Roberta had been having Grant on regularly. I wasn't trying to disrupt that, but she may have felt that I did disrupt that. And that's why she wanted to go at me. I don't know. I don't care. Doesn't really matter. But I just want to answer the specific parts of the attack. So the other part of it she's saying is I don't care about the victims. And she even added that I'd never mentioned John O'Keefe. Let's just call this for what it is. It's virtue signaling. And Grant jumped on that too. To me, there's no lower for there are some, but it's a very low form of creature that resorts to virtue signaling, because you're signaling it's not real. It's like you're just trying to signal the public how much you care about this, or how it's look at me. That's all. It's a type of virtue signaling. Look, I did a video that was a tribute to John O'Keefe. It took me all week to do it. It was a lot of work, many hours work of editing. His brother Paul had sent me the pictures and given me some information. I'm not sitting here saying that I am the main voice on sympathy for John or anything like that. I mean, you don't want to get on there and just be talking about it all the time. You're talking about the case. But I've said many times that the biggest tragedy here was a really good man was lost. But I don't know how many times you have to say it. Do you have to say it on every show? At some point, that just becomes phony. And I communicate with Paul. I think if Paul felt that I wasn't doing something properly here, he would tell me. And if he had a problem with my show and said, I'd really rather you stop covering this case, I would. The last thing I want to do is hurt anybody in the families. And there are now a lot of innocent victims here, including the people falsely accused. But yeah, certainly if John's family said, all right, that's it, enough, I would stop. And anyways, so this whole virtue signaling about saying that I don't support victims, I think it is what it is. So let's see what else we got. Now let's try to get to the Karen Reed case. I think we've had enough talk about the soap opera drama of this social media world. I don't know if envy plays a part in this stuff. I don't really know, but it's not so much that it hurts me. It just gets tedious. It's like I'd rather be thinking about other things than focusing on this petty stuff. But anyways, so Sean posted today. I don't even know if I should address this, but he posted on the taillight again. He's still somehow going down this path that the taillight was tampered in the garage, I guess, the Sally port. I don't really understand it, but I guess I'll just, in case I know most people here listening right now understand that that's not even a direction the defense is going to go in. We'll list all the reasons why, because I can do it quickly. I promise. I know people hate the word taillight. At 5 a.m., and I could play the video. I'm not going to bother. I've played it a million times in here. But the ring video pretty clearly shows that there are significant pieces missing from the side of that taillight when Karen pulls out. Also, right before she pulled out, she told Jen McCabe on the phone that the taillight was broken. Now, if you believe that Jen McCabe is a mastermind of the conspiracy, so I guess you can dismiss that piece of evidence. That's fine. But then around 5:30, she showed up at Jen McCabe's house. I believe both Matt and Jen testified to seeing that taillight and that it was missing pieces, but maybe you dismissed that too, because it's all the McAlberts, right? They're all in on it. But Kerry Roberts came over the house and saw that taillight in the driveway. And she described it vividly as in pieces. Now, sure, at some other point, somebody might have said, yeah, the taillight was cracked. But these guys don't understand that cracked is just a euphemism for a wide range of conditions of a broken taillight. If your taillight is completely shattered, people say my taillight's cracked. It doesn't mean that there's only a crack in it. It's just become one of those things that people use to describe it. But she went into detail. Oh, so somebody sent him, I got a message that I'm out of focus. So you guys can give me, looks focus. It looks like my camera's on focus to me, but you guys can give me some message if it's out of focus. Somebody messages, but sometimes when you get that message, the problem may be on their end. But let me know if I'm out of focus. So and I probably can't address it too much right now. I would have to address it after the show, but let me know if it's really out of focus. This camera's supposed to be 4K, but it looks fine to Lori. Okay. And it's not a bad thing, this face being out of focus. You don't want to zoom in too close. I like to get as far back as my mic will allow me. But so Kerry Roberts described in detail that it was missing pieces. Thank you, Cynthia. I appreciate it. And there was a little bit of plastic that is part of the structure that was sticking out. She remembered that. Adam Lally took a zoomed in photo of the taillight from the Sally port taken days later and said, "Is this what you saw?" And she said, "Yes, that's exactly what I saw." Now, the defense chose not to cross-examine Kerry Roberts. Now, that's a way of the defense saying we don't dispute what she says. Technically, can they come back later and try to dispute it and hope the jury forgot? Yes, of course they can. But is that a good strategy? Is the jury really going to forget that Kerry Roberts was shown that picture and described it very vividly and said, yes, that's what I saw? That seems unlikely. In addition, we have the dash cam video from the officer that did the wellness check. That was at 8:22 a.m. And that shows, just checking messages, seeing if my focus is back in. All right. So maybe on her end. And so that shows just checking messages. Wow, I got a lot of emails. All right. Sorry, got distracted. Anyways, so 5:30, the defense does not argue what Kerry Roberts said. You got the 8:22 dash cam video that shows it broken pieces. Now, you have to look carefully. You have to zoom in on it because the snow is kind of all around that taillight. But once you zoom in, you can see it clearly that the red part of the taillight, that's the very back and then around the corner, is missing. And I'm sure when we get more technical experts that are coming soon in this trial, they'll zoom in even more on it. So the defense is not going to argue that the taillight was tampered with in the garage in the Sally port later on. They're just not. And it's not sane to question it anymore, to really to believe in that. And I reported this a week and a half ago. The very next day after Kerry Roberts testified, I said, aha. So the fact that the defense didn't dispute this tells us they're not going to say that taillight was tampered inside the Sally port. So what are they going to say? Well, I knew they were going to say something. So I said, it dawned on me. What they're going to do is say that inside the Sally port, that's when the biological and evidence and the cocktail glass piece was planted on the SUV. So they're going to say, no, that's not when they were yanking off pieces of taillight and then racing down to the scene to bury them in the snow. That's not what they're going to say. They're going to say that that's when they planted the human hair. That's when they planted the cocktail glass piece. They have the Stop and Shop bag in the Sally port with them, so they can say, there's the evidence bag. You can just take stuff from that and plant it on the car. Now, I predicted that's what they were going to say. Now, last Friday, Alan Jackson was actually doing a very good job of leading Higgins to that conclusion. I think he only needed about a half hour to finish, too, but they ran out of time. But when he stopped, he had Brian Higgins access in the Sally port at, I forget the exact time, but like 4:08, if that rings a bell with you guys. It's a little after 4. It was a little before the SUV actually left Dighton on the tow truck. We know it left there at 4:17. It was a little before that. But so basically, the defense was saying Higgins was in the Sally port right as the SUV was about to be towed there. And so clearly they were going to say, okay, so he was still in the Sally port when it arrived. And we know from the pretrial hearing that they had already suggested that Higgins and Chief Berkowitz were with that SUV by themselves, and that's when 40 minutes of surveillance video seems to have gone missing. That was going to be very powerful, I got to say. I was like, the way that ended Friday, I know some people got upset with me, but I was like, they scored some points here, and they left it set up where they could score really what Kevin Mahoney would call a brick that you lay down that'll be a foundation for reasonable doubt. And you lay down a few bricks like that, and suddenly you can start to build something. That's how they left it Friday afternoon. Now, Alan Jackson was unavailable to continue the cross-examination on Tuesday, so they had to go with David Yannetti. But there's no reason David Yannetti couldn't do the same thing. He's a qualified, competent, in some ways talented cross-examiner. But he didn't mention the Sally Port. He didn't mention Chief Berkowitz. He didn't mention the Stop and Shop bag. He didn't mention Brian Higgins accessing that Sally Port with his key card. He didn't mention any of that. He completely abandoned that strategy that they were building up. I was perplexed. I was stunned. And I know other people that were watching this that follow this case closely were too. What happened over those 3 days that caused the complete change in course? That caused them to completely abandon that part of it. Now, they may try to resurface that later if they get Chief Berkowitz on the stand, but that's not really enough to explain it, because Alan Jackson left it right there, but then they completely abandoned it. And it's in the jury is going to remember what comes last more than what came earlier. So the jury's going to remember how David Yannetti finished things on Tuesday much more than they're going to remember what Alan Jackson did 3 days before. You want to stick the landing, right? And you want to have that grand finale. And Alan Jackson was building towards it, but they abandoned it. And the only reason I can think of is that they had to have learned something in those 3 days that said, this is a dead end. Something new. Now, I may have something for you on this. It's not inside. It's not information that was leaked from the prosecution or anything like that. But it's good information. In the last pretrial hearing, David Yannetti told the court, that the defense has a witness that saw Chief Berkowitz and Brian Higgins in the Sally Port at that time when the surveillance went missing by themselves. Now, that's important. If you could show that they were by themselves or with someone else that the defense says is a conspirator, such as Michael Proctor, that would be very effective at creating reasonable doubt. That's something the jury could sink their teeth into. Who was that witness? Well, then shortly after that, the defense witness list came out. And on that list was someone named Kelly Deaver. Kelly Deaver is a Boston police officer who had been a Canton police officer at the time. And so supposedly she was the one who was going to say that she witnessed Brian Higgins and Chief Berkowitz in the Sally Port by themselves with Karen's SUV, and maybe even with that evidence bag. Now, word is that Deborah was not happy when she found out that she was on the defense witness list, and that she has spent much of her time since, a lot of it huddled with Prosecutor Lally. Now, I have not seen anything entered into discovery, any new evidence. So if Lally took any new notes on that, he would have to enter into discovery. Maybe it was, and we just haven't seen it listed yet. I don't know. But I do think there's a chance that the defense learned that whatever Deborah was not going to say, it actually was not going to help the defense in the way that they thought. So, for instance, maybe Higgins wasn't in the Sally Port at that time. Maybe he left. Maybe Chief Berkowitz left. Or if they were there, and to me, it wouldn't be surprising if they were there, because this is a big event. The SUV that was a murder weapon being returned to this small little Sally Port in this small town. That's the kind of event that you would think that anybody who was connected to the police, who was in the building and who wasn't busy doing something else, would want to be there. Just curiosity. Just normal, everyday person, not even just police curiosity, but everyday person. If you, as a non-police officer, were in that police station at that time and you heard that this murder vehicle was coming back, and you could walk down and take a look, you would. It's just human nature. It's just human nature. Just like if there's an accident outside your house, you watch what's going on. If you drive by on the highway, there's an accident. It's not because you want to see anybody suffering, but you can't help it. It's curiosity. You slow down and look. It's just the nature of the beast. So one thing that would cause a problem is if Higgins and the chief were there, but so were 12 other people. It's kind of hard to build a conspiracy around the idea of all of these people being part of it. The more people that have to be part of the conspiracy, the harder it is to believe it. So I don't know. I have no idea what Kelly Dever is going to testify. But it does seem like maybe the defense learned something. They definitely learned something to abandon their strategy. We don't know what it was, but they definitely learned something to abandon their whole strategy of saying that this evidence planting went on. And so people in zombie world, thank you, Ocean Wave, for joining, might say, well, they can bring Higgins back on the stand. Nope. It's not that easy. For them to bring Higgins back on the stand, the defense has to get the permission of the judge. They have to convince the judge that there are questions that they could not have asked before because they didn't know about them. So that's not impossible, but while that could happen, the defense could not guarantee that Higgins would be able to get another crack at him. So there's no way that they would just let this go on the chance that they would get him back on the stand later. No, they had to make hay with it when they had the chance. The idea that they're going to bring it out of Chief Berkowitz later, well, maybe. But again, why would you not take the chance when you get him up there? And that's clearly where Alan Jackson was going Friday. So something happened over the weekend, over that 3-day weekend. Something new happened that changed that. So what is the defense strategy now? I don't know. I mean, they're going to focus on Michael Proctor, who is going to testify for the prosecution in a couple, I think next, not the coming week, but next week. What do they have on him? Do they have anything, any evidence, any witness, anything that shows him planting evidence? No. He wasn't at the crime scene that day. Was he at the Sally Port? Could he have planted John's hair? I guess. And I don't even know that he was at the Sally Port. I just assumed that he was because they had the car towed there. They were with the car in Dighton. So, but does he really? Can you really make a case that he's and not just planting a piece of evidence? Let's go back a little further. So now with the new timeline, now that the defense has accepted that the taillight was shattered and in pieces by 5:30 a.m., that means whoever tampered with that taillight, pried pieces off, and planted that evidence was not Michael Proctor. The defense is not going to say that it was Michael Proctor. I know the zombies still want to think it was Michael Proctor, but Michael Proctor wasn't called early enough for that to happen. It had to happen between 1 a.m. and 5 a.m. So somebody else had to have tampered with in order for the defense theory to work. In order for any defense theory to work here, because if you don't have the planting of those taillight pieces, then Karen did this, unless somebody else drove her vehicle, because those pieces match her car physically to the crime. And the only way you can get around that is if somebody planted those pieces deep in the snow. So they're not going to argue, in my opinion, that Michael Proctor went back to that crime scene and planted any pieces. They might try to say that he planted those little pieces days later, but that doesn't make sense either. Like, why, if you've already planted your pieces there, why are you going to go? You're going to go back every day and plant another little tiny piece? That doesn't add anything to the case. So no, I don't think they're going to argue that Michael Proctor planted any pieces. They're going to have to say that someone else did it. Now, a more reasonable, they do have stuff they can use though. So what else happened that we learned during the trial that I didn't know before the trial? and probably most of you or none of you knew it either. And that's that the door was malfunctioning that morning, wouldn't close. Now, that seems to be the kind of thing that a defense team will exploit. They're going to say, why wouldn't it close? Because somebody had broken in through that door. And that's why it was malfunctioning. Somebody had done some damage to it. Is that the only explanation? No. The most likely explanation was that something, everybody that has a garage door opener understands that if something is blocking the sensor, and snow can do that, it's not going to close. It's got a sensor that's designed to, if it detects anything, it stops it from closing so it doesn't injure somebody or doesn't damage a car. So that's how those sensors work. But the defense is certainly going to argue, well, has this happened before? Why is this suddenly happening now? Did somebody break into that garage in the morning? I think that's something the defense team will exploit. And they should exploit. That's smart defense. Let me just take a last sip of my coffee since I don't like to drink coffee too late. Tom Fleming always tells me to turn away from the mic when I drink coffee or get away from it. It's also a chance to look at the chat. Eldon Boyd is back. Good to see Eldon is alive and well. He hasn't been around for a while. I was worried. That Eldon was on hunting me down. He sends me on these, thinks I'm on these secret missions all around the world, fighting vampires and doing all kinds of stuff. And I figured maybe Eldon was out trying to stop me. Heading into a hotel with a heavyset woman wearing a Canton jacket 10 sizes too small. Yeah. I guess that would be me. Could be. So the defense is going to exploit this malfunctioning garage door to try to say that somebody broke into the garage between 1 and 5, broke pieces off that taillight and took them. And at some point later, because the Canton police mysteriously didn't protect the crime scene, then it would have been much easier for someone to go there and bury those pieces. Now, it's still not easy, right? Because you've got neighbors. Well, if the Alberts are in on the conspiracy, they don't care about the planting of, they're not going to rat on whoever's planting those pieces. And across the street is the deputy chief of police, Kelleher. So he now has to be in on it too, I guess. So a lot of people have to be in on it. But is it reasonable that someone went out in the middle of the blizzard, took that chance? Yeah, it's possible. It's not reasonable, but it's possible, right? So this to me was a more sensible way for the defense to go, and I think they're going to go there. I don't know, but they didn't try to do that with Higgins, so that makes that theory a little bit less likely, right? But they may try to finger somebody else in the Albert family, somebody perhaps with the pull to go to that crime scene because he has a badge. I think that's a direction they might go. Now, mind you, I'm telling you right now that this didn't happen. These people are innocent, but I'm just trying to predict where a defense team might rationally go. And that is a much more reasonable way to go. And Sean McDonough doesn't grasp it for some reason, but I never can tell anymore if Sean is saying things with a straight face or this is all just some big game to him. I talked to him a lot on the phone last summer. He's not an idiot. So I don't really understand why he's saying these things. Is it the kind of thing where once, like he talks about dying on the hill, is it something where you've made a mistake and you're like, I've got to die on this hill, so I have no choice but to buy into Stranger and Stranger Things? I don't know. I don't know what it is, but he keeps making predictions, major specific predictions about things that never come true. So first he said that the feds were going to stop this trial on February 15th and arrest all the conspirators. Didn't happen. Then he said April 15th. Didn't happen. They said by the time jury selection is done, before the first witness gets up. Didn't happen. Then he said Brian Higgins is going to be marched in by the U.S. Attorney's Office, by feds, in chains to testify. Didn't happen. He's talked about a proffer deal. where Brian Higgins supposedly made a deal to flip on the conspirators. I don't know how that can still be believed by anybody with a brain that's following this case a little bit even. Brian Higgins has already testified. It's done. So is it their belief that Brian Higgins flipped but didn't have to tell the state what happened? Didn't have to tell the jury what happened? Is that their belief? Is it their belief that the defense team was not going to point something out about that? I don't really get. The beliefs get so irrational that it's hard to make sense of why people entertain them. It's the need to believe, I guess, is just so powerful. So I don't know. The feds aren't coming. Even Turtle Boy is now saying the feds are not coming. Now, I'm not trying to call everybody that has questions about this case or people that are on the fence or still unsure or don't think the state has proven their case yet. I'm not calling them zombies. But if you're kind of believing things that don't make any sense at all, like the fact that the feds are still coming, you might be on guard for that little thirst for brains that you might inexplicably be having now to eat them. You might want to check your urges. If some of your urges don't make sense, if you get up in the morning and a finger falls off, you might wonder what's going on, because you might be a zombie. I'm sorry, guys. But no, if you have legitimate questions about the case, that's fine. The state has not even begun to try to go with their hard evidence yet. That begins tomorrow. Tomorrow, we're going to get the CERT team begin to testify. That's the Special Evidence Recovery Team. They're the ones that go to the scene of the crime. And they'll be testifying tomorrow. So what are they going to talk about? I mean, obviously, I don't know firsthand, but you can read into it what they're going to talk about. They're the ones that dug up the snow and found the pieces. So they would have found the taillight pieces primarily, but they also found the cocktail glass pieces. I don't know. Did they find anything else? Did they find tire tracks? None of that's been mentioned in any kind of report that I've seen, and I've read them all. But I don't know. Maybe it's just because it's not in the report doesn't mean they didn't see something. It could be in their report, and the state just chose not to include that yet in their charging documents because they didn't need it. I don't know. But certainly they're going to tell us where they found the pieces. They're going to tell us what time they found the pieces. Now, it's listed that they found the main taillight piece at 5:45. If they testify that that's accurate, then that's just yet another nail in the coffin of the idea that those pieces were pried off the vehicle at 5:30. The car didn't arrive inside the Sally Port until 5:36. I think it arrived right outside the Sally Port maybe 15 minutes before that. But to take those pieces and race to the crime scene and bury them in the snow without being seen by the CERT team, so the CERT team will talk about how long they were there beforehand, setting up. While they were doing this, the news truck, WBZ, was there and filmed it. So we're going to get the accurate times on that. And if 5:45 is accurate, then yes, that's just yet another reason to think it was impossible to plant any evidence at that time. So I'm giving you a little hint. Sean, it's your last chance to let it go. Come clean, because they're going to make an ass out of you again tomorrow. So I don't know if it means anything. Come on, go with my theory. Go with my theory on what the defense is going to say. I'm trying to help you out, buddy. Trying to help you out. So just run with it. Run with it. I'm a little more analytical than you. I'm sorry if that sounds wrong, but I am, and you know it. So go with my theory. Be more fruitful for you, I think. A little more productive. Anyways, again, this is a take it easy night. I'm just having a little bit of fun. And Thomas, yes, thank you for keeping things cool in chat. And everybody in chat also likes to be rational, level-headed, cool-headed when it comes to analysis of the evidence. And so, yeah, let's take a look at chat and see who's here to say hi. I'm going to scroll back a little bit. So Nicole Eva's here. She says, I don't need to Explain. Thank you. Appreciate it. Nicole, good to see you. She passed. Nicole's talking about someone passed away. I think that's Heels in the Air. Yeah, I felt bad about that. Gia, hi, Jackie, Wood Owl. Tom and I have visited a bar on the Cape called the Woodshed. Sounds a little similar. Imite said, I'm very curious about her reason for doing it. I think she's talking about Roberta. I don't know. It was something petty and catty. Ashley points out that the taillight was broken on the dash cam. So, yes, you can see that at 8:22. Linda Collins, Kevin and Roberta are only YouTubers. I can watch this because they feel as I do on the Karen Reed with the usual internet. And that's so tonight I've done this the third time I've done the John DePietro show. And he's actually, you guys will be happy to hear this. John DePietro is going to be coming on this show. So we can have a longer conversation because on his show, it's only 15 minutes. So it's like a very intense 15 minutes. You get a lot done in it. So that should be playing tomorrow morning. That's a Providence radio station. I should know the name of it. I don't because I don't live down. I can't get it up where I am. I'm north of Boston. Elaine said that she commented on to her and Grant about you and meaning me and my amazing advocacy for John and his family, and she blocked me. That's what it is. It's just, I don't know. It's it's catty and it's also cowardly, because I've offered to go on her show. So in the past, again, I've never been anything but civil to her. All you had to do is just say, hey, I disagree with you on having a murderer on. So can we have a dialogue about that? I would have had it. She could have come on here or I could have gone on there. Wasn't what she wanted. Are these petty grievances and jealousies? I have no idea. It seems stupid. I mean, there's plenty of this shouldn't be a competitive field. It's not like we're all on Monday night on primetime TV and this is 1978 and it's Three's Company's on one channel and the Hill Street Blues is on the other, or no, Barney Miller. Barney Miller is on the other. And so you got to choose. No, I mean, people watch what they want. And it's not like that. Thank you again, Cynthia. I appreciate it. Retro Mom or Retrom said these meatballs keep claiming the taillight was tampered with. Yeah, it wasn't. Eldon Boyd said have antiquated Rogue on. Yeah, I'd have him on. I mean, I know him. He hasn't asked me to come on. Just scrolling through for all the comments. Ted Yu says, oh, dude, you're that court TV star, right? Not a star, and it's not like it's a big channel, but I go on the channel and I have fun with it. And so I appreciate the opportunity. Hopefully they'll keep having me back. But it's just one more chance to try to make the case for people to weigh evidence rationally. And it's kind of climbing a mountain because a lot of people on these channels, including the bigger mainstream channels like that, are grifting to try to ride the wave of conspiracy. Tuesday's Dead said it's all about the grift. Ted Hughes says you look duller on YouTube. Do they shine your skull on TV? Well, obviously he's a fan, right? I don't know. Should I shine it? They do those interviews over Skype. I'm not a big fan of Skype as a program, but I can tell you too, though. So I use StreamYard here and I can have a guest on, but the guest will not be, this is because of StreamYard's policy will not have the same resolution. So if I have you on, your head won't shine as much as mine. Jackie said, I think they should call Kerry during rebuttal. Well, I don't think they can. You can't. Again, you can't recall a witness unless there's a question, and a material question that you could not have asked them before. It's not so. Otherwise, trials will go on forever, right? And this trial is already too long. Eva said, fine to have opinions, even alternate ones. Yeah, agree. That's not what happened. It was extremely critical of another show, demeaning and scolding. It was catty. It was because it was very Glare-esque, to be honest. The Glare does a reaction video, and he's not actually truly analyzing what you're saying. He's just looking to score points for his audience. And that felt like all she was doing. She had decided, for whatever reason, she had to come at me, and she saw this as an opportunity. But she went back and was going over a post, a Twitter post that I made on December 4th. Man, I made a lot of Twitter posts since then, but she picked one from December 4th. And in that post, I was talking about how if there turns out to be a massive conspiracy here and Karen is innocent and John was killed inside the house and all these people covered this up, I have said back then and ever since, I've said it since probably September or October, that if that turns out to be the case, I will quit true crime. I'll quit with a smile. It's not really something I love doing. There's other things I enjoy more. But the reason I say that is because if my analysis of the evidence is so shitty that I couldn't see this massive conspiracy, then I'm of no use to the public. So that's why I would quit. I mean, if you're not bringing anything valuable, why stick with it? So I would. But she's reading that and she's going, well, just quit, Kevin. Just quit. Just quit. I don't know why she goes with that voice that belongs in the 7th grade, but that's what she was doing. Hillbilly Nitro, always a great guest, and I get emails and videos from Hillbilly that contribute a lot to the show. So everybody can, we're all grateful. He says, I think the judge may have stopped them from going down the road with that last sidebar on Friday. Oh, okay. That's a very interesting point. So Hillbilly's point is that the defense switched strategies because the judge forced it. I don't know. I'd have to ask Kevin or maybe Joe, a trial lawyer. I don't know. It's she's given them a lot of latitude to make their points about a conspiracy, and she's going to have to, because somebody pointed out recently on a different topic on the Trump trial that just the nature of trials is the prosecution doesn't have to worry about appeals if they lose, because there's double jeopardy. So if the prosecution loses their case, that's it. The case is done. The defense, so the judge doesn't have to worry. Let me rephrase that a little bit better. So the judge doesn't have to worry about going against an objection by the prosecution that much, because there's not going to be an appeal later. If the prosecution loses, that's it. But with the defense, if the defense does an objection or the defense tries a tactic and the prosecution objects to it, the judge has a difficult decision sometimes, because if they don't make, if she doesn't want to leave an opening that, if the defense loses later on, they will appeal. That's automatic in a murder case. So she's trying to make sure. So she's going to bend over backwards to help the defense as much as possible. And you do see that going on in this case. And that's the reason why. So I don't know. Would the judge really deny them from trying to put Higgins alone with Chief Berkowitz in the Sally Port? I mean, they didn't even ask Higgins, who were you with? What time did you leave the Sally Port? Were you there when the SUV arrived? Those all seem like reasonable questions to me. So I don't know. Kier Ryan. I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name right, but what a cool name. Kiri, is it Kiri Ryan? Kier Ryan? Wow, I love that name. So they'll remember the defense theory, then going by your theory. All right, that's a good point. So obviously it's not as simple that they will just remember the thing that goes last. What I'm saying is you know this in writing. You always want to put the thing you want to emphasize most at the end of the paragraph, right? And the defense actually does a very good job. Their attorneys are much more effective than Lally at doing that. They're able to describe things in a way that lead to that ending of the point, and that they'll even put the right emphasis on the right word in order to help create that. So as far as what the jury's going to remember, it's obviously complicated, but it's not like they're just going to remember what the defense said when they're done making their case. No. And the prosecution gets to go back again too. So no. Macy says, is the Sallyport video truly missing? What about the other videos to police station that may have certain people leaving? It's a really good question about whether there are other police station videos. Excellent question. And I have to admit, for some reason, I haven't thought of it before. So thank you, Macy. That could be something that showed up, right? But so we only know what they said in the pretrial hearing. It was the last one that the defense said that there's a 40-minute gap in the video, that the video is missing. And Lally replied, there's no gap. It's a motion triggered camera, and it just wasn't triggered by motion. But David Yannetti had the perfect retort. That surveillance video apparently does not show Karen's SUV going into the garage, into the Sallyport. Now, I don't know whether they had the key and they drove it in or whether it was towed in. It was towed from Dighton, but I suppose they had the key at that point, so they probably just drove it in. It's only, I think, a 2-bay Sallyport, so probably not that, I don't know, probably a nuisance to try to have it towed in. Much easier to just drive it in. So it probably was driven in, but I don't know. But certainly opening up that Sallyport, driving in the SUV, and then the driver getting out, that's a lot of motion there. So it would seem strange that there wasn't enough motion to trigger the camera. But there may be some other reason, right? Some other explanation, although Lally did not give it at that moment. So during the pretrial hearing, it would seem that David Yannetti won the point. But there may be more, these videos, I don't know. I'm not going to, if motion triggers something, but then the motion continues, is there a point where it stops? I don't know. I really don't know. So, but it's a good question if there's other videos from inside the building. So for instance, what if you got video inside the building around 5:30 of Brian Higgins walking by the dispatch desk? I don't know. So there could be something. I don't know where. I don't know how extensive the surveillance video is within that building, but there could be other evidence. There could be other key card evidence that shows Brian Higgins going into another room. Although Lally seems like that would have been a good time for him to point that out, and he didn't. Carrie says she's on the witness list. You may be talking about Dever. I'm not sure. But keep in mind, I think she may be actually talking about Kerry. My understanding is, and I'm not a lawyer, so if there's a lawyer here, please chime in. But just because you have, so for instance, let's say Kerry Roberts is on the defense list and on the prosecution's list. It doesn't, once Kerry Roberts has been called by the prosecution, just because she's on the defense's list does not mean they get to call her. So again, I could be wrong on that. So please, if there's a lawyer, chime in here, send me an email, send me a text. My email is leitskev@gmail.com. Leitskev, LEITSKEV @gmail.com. If Kevin or Joe happen to be listening, please shoot me a text. But my understanding is that let's say a witness is on both the witness list of both the prosecution and the defense. If the prosecution does in fact call that witness, that's the defense's chance to ask their questions. It's the cross-examination. And so now that person is taken off the defense list. Again, I'm not sure about that, but I believe they are, because otherwise you'd have a lot of, they want to keep these trials at least under 3 months, right? I mean, it's already crazy. So my understanding is that's how it works. In order to bring a witness back that's already been on the stand, you would have to show that there is some question that could not have been asked under cross-examination the first time, something that is material. So something that developed during the trial. So for instance, I guess in theory, if Berkowitz came out and said, I was alone with Brian Higgins at 5:30 in the Sally Port. Well, if that happened, maybe in theory, again, I'm not a lawyer, but that sounds to me like you'd be able to make the case to Judge Cannone that you need to bring Higgins back on the stand. Right? But that's a big chance for the defense to take, not knowing what Berkowitz is going to testify. So I don't believe that they would take that chance and just decide to drop it on Tuesday. And I think whoever made the point about possibly, maybe it was Kerry that said it, but possibly that the judge stopped that line of inquiry, maybe, but I don't think so. What about John's blood being on the outside of the knob in the basement? There's no evidence for that. You're making that up. Kerry, you have to be careful about what you see in social media. Okay, there is no evidence of John's blood being outside the knob in the basement. That's just fiction. And there's a lot of fiction that goes on in this case. And I'm not blaming you for falling for it, but please be careful. Things that are reported in social media are not evidence. This is a problem that I have with Grant. He reports things that aren't evidence. He saw somebody else mention it in social media. You can't do that. All right. Thank you, Ocean Wave. You can't do that. So just because I have never heard that evidence would be huge. That evidence would be enough to stop the trial. And that hasn't happened. Tara White says defense is always backpedaling because the story won't hold together because there was no conspiracy to defend in the first place. The Free Karen Reed have made this what it is, a bowl of nothing soup. It really, in my view, I agree with that. Of course, their job is to create just some reasonable doubt. They don't have to prove that there was a conspiracy. They have to make it plausible that there was a conspiracy. Have they done that? To me, no, definitely not even close. But they're not done yet, and they haven't called their own witnesses, so maybe they can do that. Right. But at this point, they have not done it at all. And I do feel there is an issue with the jury seeing so much nonstop gamesmanship being done by the defense lawyers where they're constantly trying to make an argument with a question and make a bogus argument that's not supported by anything. That kind of stuff eventually causes the jurors to really get resentful. I think Elaine might be a lawyer. So the defense cannot call Higgins back, right? Let me know if I got that right, Elaine. Elaine, you're making stuff up. You're making stuff up. Okay. You believe that the FBI found evidence. Let's approach this. Well, again, take it easy, Knight. We'll take it easy, take it cool. Let me give you the benefit of the doubt that you're a really intelligent and introspective person. And you're seeing something reported somewhere. And so you've seen somewhere that the FBI found blood evidence from John on the doorknob. Where have you seen it? Okay, so we can go back and look at this a little bit. Now, I've seen every hearing and read every document. That's never been mentioned in a single document. It was never mentioned in a hearing. Now, in case you're getting here late to this case, I'm not saying you are, I'm just saying in case, because people are joining it now. In the earlier hearings, not the early hearings, but in some of the most recent hearings, there was a motion by the prosecution that the defense cannot include the third-party culprit theory in their arguments, particularly in their opening. And the reason they said that was because there's no evidence. And the judge completely concurred. She emphatically said to David Yannetti in court, this is televised, we were watching, that there's no evidence to support the third-party culprit theory. Nothing. So she basically said, I'm not going to let you go with this. She gave a chance that day. Give me your evidence. So this is what you need to know, Carrie. David Yannetti was given that moment by the judge. Take as long as you need. Explain to me why there's a third-party culprit theory that should be allowed. Explain, which is a different way of saying, explain to me the defense, why we should support the defense's theory that John went in the house. Now, at that moment, David Yannetti is going to grab his most powerful evidence that he can that shows that maybe John went in the house. And he did not mention the FBI finding blood evidence on the door. And he would have. Okay, so if you accept that absolutely David Yannetti would have mentioned that, so therefore they would be allowed by the judge to go with the third-party culprit theory and mention it in the all-important opening, the opening in which they said that Karen was framed, that there was a conspiracy, that would have been pretty useful for them to have that piece of evidence. They didn't have it. Now, one of the strange things that are being said on the other channels is that the FBI or the U.S. Attorney's Office has this key evidence and they've withheld it. They're holding on to it like they're ace in the hole. No. And I'll tell you why. The U.S. Attorney's Office signed a protective order, an agreement with the prosecution and the defense. So all three parties signed it, that they promised to turn over all relevant evidence and material that they had relevant to the Karen Read case. All of it. So there's no way that they were legally bound to do that. They couldn't hold it back. Okay? If they held something back, then they have to put the cuffs on themselves because they violated the protective order that they signed. So no, this did not happen. Now, unless you're going to believe that the FBI went there last week and found that evidence, that's crazy. The FBI did not go to 34 Fairview last week. We don't know when the FBI ever went to the house. We've heard that maybe they went in and looked at the floor. I don't know. I know the defense team was given permission to go and dig up the floor a little bit, and they didn't find anything. But nothing was mentioned about any of this. So it doesn't seem, if the FBI was given permission, or if the FBI went to the house and did any investigating on their own, they completed that a long time ago. They didn't do it in the last month. So no, that's just, I'm sorry, Carrie, that's just not true. And just be careful about what you're seeing out there. Just because you have a cool name doesn't mean people are lying to you or aren't lying to you. They're lying. Just looking through the chat, guys. Trying to get caught up. Sometimes it's hard to get caught up. And Carrie is here. Hi, Carrie. Hope you're doing well. Yup, reminded us that Karen never went to bed. Yeah, and I think that meant a lot to the family that when they got there, the bed was unslept in. So later on, Karen claimed much later on that she slept on the couch. Maybe she did, but Tara White says that Free Karen Read giving tons of credit to the so-called conspirators, basically calling them geniuses. Yes, this is a big point that I've pointed out for a long time. You're just, these people are mad. If you took all of the supervillains that were ever created in the history of the comic book world, all of them, and boil them all into one evil genius. And let's throw in Professor Moriarty from Sherlock Holmes, too. If you put all of those things together into one supervillain, Hannibal Lecter, too, this genius character. That's what they say Jen McCabe is. That Jen McCabe actually convinced Kerry Roberts to test. That's what I saw that today. That she, that whack job Haley, that Kerry Roberts testified that her testimony was fabricated by Jen McCabe, who whispered things in her ear. Kerry Roberts, who didn't know Jen McCabe, had maybe met her once, was not friends with the McCabes, not friends with the Alberts. Kerry Roberts, who was lifelong friends with John O'Keefe and the O'Keefe family. Kerry Roberts, who picked up Mr. and Mrs. O'Keefe and took him to the hospital that morning and saw John's body in the hospital. Kerry Roberts, who went through all that. The idea that Jen converted her to being part of the conspiracy, it's crazy. And you want to be respectful to people, but believing in stuff like that is crazy. Julie Carpenter is here too from Indiana. Hi, Julie. Zoe. Kevin, why was Karen allowed to go to sidebar? That's a good question. And the answer, I remember watching it at the time. I was like, wow, is she part of the team now? No, but the reason was because the court had to get her to sign off on the fact that Alan Jackson was not going to come back Tuesday and finish the cross-examination of Brian Higgins. So that was the reason. Sorry about that clicking noise. This button makes less clicking. I'm trying to. Yes, Retro Turtle Boy is Fredo. He's been having a meltdown because Nick's on court TV. Discerning the Truth said Turtle Boy is planning their verdict party for Karen Reed's acquittal now. I don't know how many of these people are deluded enough to believe that. Look, you might still believe that the defense hasn't made their case yet, so maybe some new thing comes out. But at this point, I don't get it. And it bothered me. I watched an episode of Court TV today that must have been on last night. It was a different host. I didn't know him, but they had on 3 lawyers that weren't that familiar with the case. And the way they played all these clips, it made it seem like the defense's case is a million times stronger than it is. I don't think people are going to feel that way that watch the whole case. Tuesday's Dead says Turtle is about to flip on Karen to save himself. And, there were times this week it seemed to me that it was not that difficult to imagine that 2 weeks from now, Turtle Boy will be saying Karen's guilty and Grant Ellis Smith will be saying Karen's innocent. It was really strange. I don't know if that's going to happen, but it didn't seem absurd to think that. Jill Downey, hi, good to see you. Lori, oh, Kate's here too. I'm a little ways back. 8:37, almost a half hour back. So I gotta. But if you're still here, hi, Kate. See you tomorrow morning, hopefully. Try to roll through this quicker. There was let's stop for a second. I don't want to give him too much attention. But Grant had a post from today that kind of indicates part of the problem. I'm not going to read the whole post because some of it was kind of nasty, but he says, now that I think about it, the goal of certain people all along was to get Aiden to flip on Karen. And I think by certain people, he's talking about Kate. In the context of an ongoing witness intimidation and conspiracy probe into both of them. And that would mean Aiden's other cases would need to go away. He says, I guess that explains why a few people have spent months trying to pressure Lindsay into silence and then punished her by leaking her phone to TB after she wouldn't do so. I guarantee it wasn't Kate that leaked that. there's more stuff on here, but the interesting part is it's a crazy argument. And who among us hasn't made a crazy argument from here and there, right? Especially if you're speculating, right? Sometimes you speculate on something and then later on you're like, yeah, that probably doesn't work. But he ends his post by saying, this is child's play. In other words, he's figured it all out and it's child's play. Now, tomorrow, he might have a completely different theory. But this is why I want people to be more introspective. All of us, right? If you're Grant and tomorrow you have a completely different theory, don't you look back and say, why did I think it was child's play yesterday? Because when you're saying it's child's play, you're saying this is something that my vastly superior mind can figure out. It's so easy a caveman can do it. Well, then if it was that easy, if tomorrow you come to a different understanding, don't you say maybe it wasn't child's play yesterday and maybe I shouldn't have said that? This is part of the problem with just coming to conclusions too easily based on very thin evidence. I mean, I'm sorry, that's just the problem. And I'd seen this going on for months. Didn't really say anything because I rooted for the guy. It's entertaining, but you can't just keep putting stuff out there that isn't true. But what leads you to mistakes is when you think that your intellect and your psychic abilities are so superior that you have an understanding of things that ordinary human beings don't have. That's a problem. That's what leads you to problems. That's what leads you to bad conclusions. Anyways, if there's a way to influence him to dial it back, that's what you got to do. Look in the mirror and say, what's leading to me these errors? Same thing with Sean McDonough. If you're going to, if you just look back at all the wild things that you claimed were going to happen, not even speculation, but just things that you claimed were with certainty going to happen over the last 6 months, and how many times you were wrong, don't you sit there and say, maybe I need to rethink how I'm doing things because I'm making a lot of claims that don't come true? I mean, I think that's something you got to think about, So try to get through a few more comments and not going to make this too long. Tomorrow is a full day. Tuesday is off. Wednesday's a full day. Thursday's a half day. Friday's off. That's for court. So unless they for some reason mad at me, I would expect that Court TV will have me on those 3 days, but not the other days. Trying to work it out, the time to do a longer interview with John DePietro. So, but we'll be covering it tomorrow with the usual, some combination of our usual cast of wild characters of me, Kate, Jen, and Karen. Not Karen Reed. Karen McCormick. I'm always talking about someone named Boston Strong. So I'm going to put this up here. I don't know who Boston Strong is. Is that a channel? But she says she loves her content or his content. I don't know. But we'll look for the comments here. If it's a channel, we'll promote it. We'll give it a mention, give it a plug. Jason says Sean has been wrong 100% so far. And that means a lot coming from Jason because Jason is someone who is a contrarian with us. And we value him for that. But he seems to be very skeptical of the state's argument in this case. And even he says Sean is wrong about everything. Turtle Boy has said that too. Thank you, Ema T. Toller. You make it hard for me to say these names. And Otam says, is Turtle Boy still allowed in the courtroom? It pisses me off too. It shouldn't happen. Yes, Lori. Yep. Oh, it's only 9 to 12 Thursday. Usually those half days go to 1. Okay, but thank you. Yes, court tomorrow, Jennifer Ray. And for me, finally the trial gets a little bit more interesting. Not that there hasn't been a lot of interesting things, but I want to see the physical evidence. I want to see that discussed. So we're going to find out tomorrow. It's the CERT team will be there, the special evidence recovery team. And so they're going to talk about what time they found the pieces, what time they were there, what time they set up, all that stuff. Jason says, have you figured out where Higgins disappeared to for almost an hour before going to the CPT? You know what? It's interesting, right? I think you know my theory on that, Jason. It's just a theory, though. I don't have any evidence for that. I'm sure it's wrong, but it was just a floated the idea that he hit a bar for last call. And that's the kind of thing that if he got to stay a little bit after hours, which he probably would if he knows the bartender and he's in law enforcement and he's a regular at that place. If he did that, he might want to in his initial statements try to protect that bar and say, I just went there. But again, I have no evidence for that. And there's other explanations too. He says he left between 12:30 and 1. Well, if he left at 1 and it's a 5 to 7 minute drive to the police station. If he did anything else, he hasn't told us, like if he stopped and plowed somebody's driveway. He didn't mention that. So according to him, he went straight to the police station. But, was he in his Jeep for a while texting somebody, seeing if somebody else is still up? I don't know. And I don't think he remembers. So it's not necessarily lying. I just think he doesn't remember. The key code hit the Sally port at 1:27, I think. But that doesn't mean that's the time he arrived. He could have initially got there and someone held the door for him. And he didn't have to hit the key code. So, I mean, we don't know. I just thought, listen, there's not much in life I do know well. And one of them is the bar life. I spent 20 years in it. I was an owner for the last 10. And the way these bars work, they have their closing time. So this would have been about 12:30. It would have been closing time in that town. And a lot of these bars, if their crowd dwindles down, the bartender might even close a few minutes early. And so if you know the bartender, you might text him and say, hey, buddy, I'm on my way down. Now, I was on the other end of that. As the bar owner, I would get those texts. And some of them were from police friends. They would say, hey, man, I'm coming. They want to make sure I stayed open. Hey, buddy, I'm on my way down. Of course, I always stayed open anyways. But no, because he knew me, he'd get to finish his drink and maybe have another one. Yes, that's true. You can't really find me for it now. But yes, some of my police friends and other friends might stay for a couple of drinks after the door was locked. Now, that's not something that if that person was leaving the bar and later on had to testify to his whereabouts, he probably would want to protect the bar and the bartender by saying he didn't go there. He would remove himself from that narrative. And then later on, and at the time he did it, it wouldn't seem that important. So if in the early days when they asked Brian Higgins where he was, he'd just say, I went from 34 to the police station. And he would never think he would get to this point. But now he can't go back and say, shit, I hit my local watering home. I know people and I stayed after hours for a couple of drinks and then I left. He can't really say that now because then it makes it look like he didn't tell the full story before. So it would cause impeachment of the rest of his testimony. So again, it's just a theory. I have no evidence that he went anywhere else. So this is the difference between me and what, say, someone like Grant might do on Twitter. I'm speculating, and that's it. And I tell you that I'm speculating. I haven't seen any evidence for it. So Lavish Love says, Kevin and Kate have been the real MVPs. I can't wait to see who plays you in the Netflix movie. Well, I'm sure they'll get someone lovely to play Kate, but me, it's going to be some old timer. and actually, I would not have a part in the movie. I'm very peripheral to the story, but Kate is much more central, and she was the first person who went and investigated the case on the part of the prosecution side, other than official investigators. Nobody in the media was doing that. And I'm sure all of the families were like, who the hell is this person? She's not, what newspaper does she write for? So she had to face that barrier, but she got through it and got everybody to eventually trust her and give her the information. And she did more original evidence research on this case than anybody. So me, that's not the case. My role was just meant to kind of get what she reports and other people report and cover it. Eventually I did develop sources, but I'm not an investigator. My first time in Canton was only a couple months ago. Went with Dave McGrath and his son. And I really don't think I ever reached out to a single person. People reached out to me eventually. And a lot of people reach out, and you decide who is a source and who isn't. You decide who gives you valuable information, who doesn't, who gives you information you can count on. And so with some people, if they give me information, I wouldn't report it, but I'd have the information and I would continue the dialogue with them. And then it might come true the next hearing or the next this and that. So they develop credibility with me. So then now it becomes something that I can report. That was maybe there's a better way to do it. That was my amateur approach to it, my instincts on how it should be done. And it's a learning thing, Kevin is a cancer survivor, so for him to say shit like that is even more appalling, shameful. I don't know. What did I say? Did I miss something? I didn't say anything against anybody's health. I don't know. I'm not sure what apparently, unless you're talking about another Kevin, I did something shameful as a cancer survivor. Oh, I'm not only a survivor, I have an active case of it, but I guess I've survived 5.5 years with it. So, Steve said, I don't agree with everything Kate says, but I could listen to her describe paint dying for days. Yeah. And she's been fantastic on my show. So, I shouldn't even say my show. I set up the stream, but our stream that we all do together, primarily me, Kate, and Jen, she's had fantastic insights. No, Kate's a nice person, but she's a street fighter. And it's her story to tell why she became that way, what her past was like, her growing up and all those things. So I'm not going to tell it. And I don't really know it that well, but usually people that are street fighters were shaped by things that happened to them. And so she's a fighter, and she, from her own experience dealing with the Aidenists for years, she understands that sometimes, or at least her view is the only way to fight is to be a street fighter. So that's her approach. Jason, like I said, I love you, buddy, for your contrarian, but is it really? Oh, I'm sorry. You said Proctor. My mistake. I was thinking Higgins. If Proctor pleads the fifth at any point called, is the trial over? Proctor's not going to plead the fifth. Proctor has not committed any crimes in this case. Proctor does have some messages on his texts that he's going to find that he's embarrassed about. Those are things that were on his personal phone, messages from other people. But look, any one of us, probably a lot of us, have those kind of messages at some point, things that are taken out of context. So it's going to be a rough ride. And maybe some of it, and if he's made mistakes in the investigation, and I don't know that he has or hasn't, he hasn't had a chance to testify. But if he does, those are things that he will have to be held accountable for. But making mistakes is a very different thing than planting evidence, than being part of a murder conspiracy, a murder cover-up conspiracy, where you're going to go to jail for decades. So I'm willing to say with a lot of confidence, Jason, that Michael Proctor is not going to plead the fifth to anything, and that he's not part of a cover-up. He has not committed any crimes. And it's in terms of whether he made insensitive texts to other friends, we'll see. And people can be the judge of that, and the jury can weigh that. In terms of if he's made any mistakes in his investigation, I think it's important to keep in mind the defense, and this part of their job to do this, but they're going to paint everything in a certain light. And what we expect people to do, and hope the jurors do, and people in the public do, is to weigh it a little bit more skeptically. So, for instance, one of the things that is said is, why didn't Michael Proctor recuse himself from this investigation? Well, that's not how it works. Michael Proctor tells his supervisors if there's a potential conflict of interest. And my understanding is he did do that. He explained to him what his connection was. It was not a direct connection, but there was a family member to family member connection. So we'll see what the testimony is. But my understanding is that he did tell his supervisors. And so we'll get not only Michael Proctor to talk about that, but his supervisor, Lieutenant Tully. And so you can decide if you found what they say convincing. But the other thing is that I've learned is that it's not that easy to just replace somebody on the investigation with someone else. These guys work for CPAC. They work for the county. They're part of a homicide team assigned to Norfolk County. I don't know how many people are on that team, but it's a limited amount. Might be 5 guys, 5 people. Not sure the amount, but they're all busy. You've already seen Michael Proctor involved in other big cases, such as the Brian Walsh case. So it's not like this is an NFL team and you can just go to the bench that easily and bring another guy in. It causes problems. And if they have to bring in someone from outside of the people assigned to that CPAC team, now you're going to bring it from somebody else's team or from some other department. And it just creates a bit of a headache. Now, obviously, if the circumstances are extreme enough, then you do it. You have to do it. But it's not something they would have been quick to do because it just wasn't that easy. Deb Cusio said, Kevin, thank you for your common sense explanation. So tired of others just spewing theories with no foundations. Exactly. And like I said many times, there's a big difference between, there are odd things in every case. Every case. If you look, and you might say, well, what about this case? I didn't see that. But how many cases have you really dug into that deeply? Most of us, for many people, this is their first one. I've dug into some other ones, but every case I've dug into, you find these odd things. And the more resources the defense team has, the more they can dig in, the more they're going to find them. But even in the Richard Allen case in Delphi, he's got public appointed defense attorneys, and they're finding odd things, a lot of them, more than you're finding here. It's just, the reason it's a little bit easier there is because that investigation was ongoing for 6 years. And it was this very widespread, all hands on deck thing because of the brutal nature of those murders of those 2 girls. So that meant there was a whole bunch of different agencies coming in, and that makes it more likely that you're going to see mistakes, something, a tape goes missing or notes go missing or something like that. And so it's but there's always stuff you can find in these cases, and it's the job of the defense to exploit it. But us and the public has to learn to know better. Odd things can be meaningful. If you have a number of inexplicable, very odd things, those could be clues to what really happened, right? But if the core evidence creates something that is airtight, then those odd things are just odd things. They don't really matter. Now, we have to see all the evidence here before we can say this. But from what we've seen, it seems to be probably the case that this case is going to be airtight because there was virtually no opportunity to tamper with that taillight and plant evidence. But we have to have the case. The case isn't done. The state isn't done making their case yet, so we really have to kind of say that. All right, so I skipped to the end in the comments. I had to hit that button that brings me to the end just because I can't keep up sometimes trying to respond. So I apologize if I missed somebody's question. Oh, Kerry, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Kerry said, I'm buying coffee for Kevin and Queen Kate tomorrow. I'm not going to be there, but if I was, you could buy me coffee. I'd love to have coffee with you and Kate, but I am going to be streaming this. Or maybe this is her $19 or $20 contribution was to buy us coffee for tomorrow. So thank you. Now I got to find a way to get it to Kate so I can buy her coffee. Okay, so Jason clarified if he went through her phone without a warrant. We'll see, right? Those things, yeah, the more you do something like that violates somebody's rights, it could be a problem. So that could be a problem. We'll see. But I have had no indication that he plans on pleading the fifth to it. And so we'll see what that testimony is. And you do also get sometimes into, so we'll call it the OJ situation. This isn't really the OJ situation. It was much more complicated. But when people talk to an OJ, they're saying that potentially the jury is convinced that the defendant is probably guilty, but they're dismissing it because of police misconduct. In that case, Mark Furman. So that's known as an OJ. Now, in reality, in the situation, OJ was way different than that. There were juries that were sympathetic to OJ for different reasons. So, but let's just call that an OJ. So could that be the case here where the jury feels that Karen did it, but they dismiss the charges because of misconduct? That's going to be up to the jury. I don't know. Lavish Love, thank you. Lavish Love is says I'm paying back Grant's $20. Yeah, granted, I had said to Grant, I felt bad. I still feel bad sometimes for, I don't know, he's a character, I guess, but he was always saying he had no money for lunch. So I said, Grant, I'm coming into Dedham tomorrow. I'll buy you lunch. And he got right back. He goes, can you give me $15 gas money instead so I can get to court? So I gave him $20. But thank you, Lavish. Tiger Lily says, I think her phone went through a tainting that weeded out the privileged attorney-client info. Yes, it did. So apparently the defense or somebody is going to say that Michael Proctor went through that before that. I don't know if that's the case. You know, if it is, what do you do? You know, it's a problem if it is that enough to lead to this jury dismissal? I don't think so, but it really depends on how, not if that's the only thing that happened, but if you can show some other evidence that maybe made it plausible that evidence was planted, then maybe. But I mean, I think a jury's going to be very reluctant to dismiss, especially if they believe that Karen deliberately left John to die. Now, we don't know that. That hasn't been submitted in evidence yet. So we don't know that. But if that ever turned out to be the case, for instance, if she turned off her GPS when she went out looking for John, I don't know how the jury can dismiss that because John was still alive at that time. So I think it would be a problem, but it wouldn't, if there was something like that, it wouldn't surprise me. If it makes it more likely that the jury is going to dismiss something. But I think there's also, maybe we'll get close to ending on this, but I think there's when you're in the jury room, I've been in a couple of juries where not everybody agrees completely. then I think there's a tendency to try to come up with a compromise solution. And so that could happen here, right? Where let's say you have 12 jurors and a couple of them are really suspicious about the state's case, and the judge makes them stay in the room and come to a decision and doesn't want them to come to a hung jury. I think, and the other 10 people feel it's pretty certain that Karen's vehicle did this. You could get a compromise solution on manslaughter. So I think it's possible you could get a compromise solution. But, we saw with the Trump jury, even though there was a lot of problems with that case, and even though most people in that jury probably were Democrat based on the demographics of the population, it was unanimous and they convicted him of every count. So is that a case that every single person on that jury felt completely like that? Or was that a case where some people had some reservations, but the majority prevailed? I don't know. I haven't seen if any of the jurors have talked about it, so I really don't know. Angela Martin's in. I'll scroll back. I don't want to be unfair to her comment. I know which side she's on. So let's see. So she says, "Are you guys even watching the trial?" Serious question. All right, I'm gonna take your question in the spirit of you're meaning it seriously and you're not at all trying to be insulting or stir things up. Yeah, I think what happens is people that already believe and that are eager to believe for whatever reason that there's a conspiracy here, you have a process of confirmation bias. So what happens is you start interpreting every little discrepancy. Aha. So all day you're sitting there going, aha, there it is. That's it. Jen McCabe lied. She plotted this conspiracy. Even though all you're really finding is some minor discrepancy. I think that's what happens, Angela, to you. And so I apologize. I don't mean that. I'd say that respectfully. I know how you feel about this case. And I believe that this is what happens with a lot of, look, when I was in Dedham a few weeks ago, I met a lot of free Karen Reed people that were earnest, intelligent, but they're believers. They believe in the story. They don't have any questions. And so they interpret every single piece of evidence in a way that is 100% pro-defense. They're not sitting there trying to balance it. And that's what I worry that you're not doing, Angela, is that you are not trying to balance the information. So let me give you an example, Angela, and let me know if you think this is fair, okay? Let's take some of the more suspect pieces of evidence on the part. Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. But let's take some of the more suspect pieces of the prosecution's witnesses. So something that you would find gives you the most problems in the testimony so far. So for instance, let's take Katie McLaughlin, and you're saying you think that she wasn't being forthcoming in the extent that she knows Caitlin Albert. Well, is she really likely? Is a firefighter? Does she know Caitlin Albert that well that she's willing to deliberately provide false information in a jury that would be used to convict somebody else? Is that the most likely explanation for her possibly minimizing her relationship with Caitlin? Can you think of any other possible explanations for that? Now, let's keep that explanation as a possibility. So one possibility is that Katie McLaughlin is part of a conspiracy to help frame Karen Reed. Okay, that's in door number A. That's a possibility. But can you think of any other possibilities why she might minimize her relationship with Caitlin? So, for example, she hasn't seen Caitlin in years. She's not someone that she doesn't have her in her cell phone. She doesn't exchange texts with her, but she knows her. She went to school with her. She went on some trips with her years ago. Now, Katie's also someone that has been attacked mercilessly for 1 year by that crowd, mercilessly. Her life made miserable, like all the other witnesses. The attacks personal, people digging into her background. She's been subjected to that for a year. And so maybe on the stand, she doesn't want her relationship or her limited relationship with Caitlin to be something that damages the prosecution's case. Is that possible? Would that be a reasonable explanation to why she's telling the truth about what she witnessed that afternoon, or that morning rather, at the crime scene, but that she's later on minimizing her connection to Caitlin? Is that a possible explanation? Is that something that you, when you're listening to her testimony, that you at least weigh? All right, let's go on to the next one. I think the next most suspicious testimony would be Brian Higgins and Brian Albert both upgrading their phones on the 29th of September, 2022, the day before they were about to be ordered to preserve their phones. And then later on, once we're given the all clear as the order to preserve was dropped, the court said they don't have to. Then at that point, they destroyed their phones. Now, you can look at different explanations for that, right? Again, so option A is they're part of a conspiracy. They're trying to destroy evidence of their communications of them running a conspiracy. That's an option. But are there other options that enter your mind? All right. So let's just ask this before we even get to those other options. If you're Brian Higgins and you're involved in a murder conspiracy, why do you wait until September of 2022 to destroy the evidence on your phone? Don't you do that pretty much the next day? Don't you destroy, or maybe if you don't want it to look suspicious, you do it a month later? Why do you wait until September to destroy evidence on your phone of a conspiracy? Is that something you ask yourself? I'm just saying, is that something, Angela? I'm asking on it nicely. Is that something that you ask yourself? So then another question would be, does it occur to you that possibly there might be something else on Brian Albert's phone or Brian Higgins' phone that they might not want to be public? It could be a politically incorrect comment that they made. If they work in public jobs, you could get fired for making, I'm not going to mention those comments. I don't want to get a strike. And that's how sensitive it is now. If I even say some of those words here, I could get a strike on my channel. Those strikes are permanent. But is it possible that those guys had a comment like that on their phone? Is it possible that they had embarrassing texts between them? You already saw embarrassing texts. You saw texts between Karen and Brian Higgins that Brian Higgins is ashamed of. He wishes those things were not public. So is it possible that Brian Higgins and Brian Albert had things on their phone? These guys are cops. They know the way it works. They know the way it works better than you and I do, right? So they know that eventually, once you turn your phone over, all this shit is going to be made public. All this shit is going to be exploited by a defense team. So is it possible that they had embarrassing stuff on there? This is what the main accusation is going to be against Michael Proctor, that he may have had some texts that, taken out of context, are embarrassing. So I'm not telling you what the reason is for Brian Higgins and Brian Albert getting new phones. And I'm not telling you that I believe that they were forthcoming. I don't. I do believe they probably had something embarrassing on their phones. But I don't think it had anything to do with a murder conspiracy, because they would have destroyed those phones months earlier. So to me, the more logical explanation, especially when you take that 2,000-foot view, that aerial view, when you're flying in a low plane and you're looking over and you're taking in the landscape, taking that overview, you look at all the other evidence, the implausibility of having to tamper with that taillight, the implausibility of having the opportunity to do that, of having the opportunity to plant evidence, the implausibility of all 11 people in the house staying quiet, the implausibility of the medical examiner not seeing any evidence of this or being somehow co-opted into part of the conspiracy. All that stuff is highly unlikely stuff. So when you really build that together into a structure, then it becomes way more likely that what happened on Brian Higgins with their phones has nothing to do with this case. So that's how I weigh it. That's how I process it. You may process it different, but all I'm asking is that you please try to see it from different angles. Try to see, when you look at any problem, when you're looking for solutions, try to look at it from various angles and see how things fit in. And then you zone in on the particular, and then you go up outside and you take the overview and look at the overall, look at everything. And you zoom in and out. You zoom in and out to try to find out where you stand on things. That's how I would look at this case. And that's how I do look at these cases. And I hope that that's something you do. And if you do that and you come up with different conclusions, but you're still at least honestly trying to ask as many of those questions as you can from different angles, then God bless you. I welcome you here, and that's fine. You know, that's if you're taking an honest approach to this evidence, then I can respect you. Is that fair, Angela? I'm going to be getting off shortly because my back's starting to hurt me a little bit. So, I know, Angela, you're upset with some people in chat, but I know sometimes when you're chat war, it becomes hard to listen. So I'm just curious, Angela, were you able to listen to what I was saying? If you're still here, Angela, just let me know. I'm curious about that. I know it's hard to listen and be in a chat war. I know sometimes when I'm in the trial, when I'm following the trial, and then I start just even joking around with people in chat, I find myself forgetting. I feel like I'm worried that I missed a key piece of testimony, So pretty insane. Did you listen to what I said? And did it make any difference to you? Are you looking at all of these things from different angles? Is what I said reasonable? Even if you don't fully agree with it, is what I said reasonable? That's all I ask, is because I have faith that people, if they will continue to look at things in a both sides kind of way, more often than not, they'll get to the truth. So I have some people to thank you. Patrice, thank you very much. The number here continues to grow. Well, very small, very slowly, Pat. The grifters are temporary. I don't know if it works that way. There's a reason that even a lot of these big national channels seem to be grifting on this case a little bit too. I can't really do anything. You want the numbers. I really don't care about the numbers, except I want them to be big enough that I can convince good guests to come on. But other than that, the main thing is to have a good core group of people in chat that are all rational. And maybe we are able to, and this is why, if you're talking to Angela Martin, maybe try to consider what's the best way to get her to look at things on her own, but from various angles. Because I think that's the way intelligent people come to decisions. It has to be on their own. It can't be based on something for the most. It's not based on our conclusions. They have to come to it themselves. But that's the best way. It's just to look at everything from every possible angle and zoom in and zoom out and so you get in deep and look at the close-up level at any particular piece of evidence and see what are the different possibilities. But then you go up and look at the overview and see how things fit into the overall case. Lou Lamorocco gave me $10. Thank you. He said, thank you for your content, integrity, heart, and soul always. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely what I try to do. And I think people here are the same way. So that's why they appreciate it. I only speak for them in the sense that if we were all in the room, we'd be saying similar things. In no way do I tell them what to think. They just know I happen to be the one with the mic. And they don't want to set up a mic. So they appreciate that I'm here thinking in a way that's very similar to theirs. Nobody's committed perjury. But you can look up what perjury is. Perjury is to deliberately tell a lie under oath that is material. And don't forget that aspect of it. It has to be material to the case. So if they ask a witness if he's ever cheated on his wife and he lies, that's not perjury because it's not material to the case. So nobody has been shown to lie here. There's been no evidence here. Now, we may not believe that some of the witnesses are always forthcoming on everything, but that's nowhere near what it's take to show them perjury. It's nowhere, it's not even close. So there's nothing like that. And on the whole, the witnesses have been very credible. And even the witnesses that were not, we'll finish on Jason's Celtics question. Even with the witnesses that may not seem to have been 100% on every single issue, on the whole, they seem credible. On the whole, to me, Brian Albert seemed credible. Now, people dig in their heels. So when Brian Albert, he wanted to describe what he was doing with Brian Higgins in the bar as horsing around, I think, or something like that. Whereas the defense kept wanting to insert the words play fighting into his mouth. And he knew that and didn't want to. But that's not lying. That's not even lack of credibility. I mean, the jury can sense that they're trying to plant words in his mouth and he didn't want to go there. But in terms of Brian describing the rest of his day and what happened at the house, that all seemed very credible. It's not enough to show that someone is a little bit, that they're partially impeached because they weren't forthcoming. In this case here, we have to show that these people were part of a murder conspiracy. No. Again, so we'll go back to the Celtics question, but I want to get to our friend Angela. A discrepancy is not a lie. If you say something in front of a grand jury that happens 6 months after the crime, and then you go before another grand jury another year later, and there's some small discrepancy, that is not perjury. That's not even lying. And one thing that the defense is continuously trying to say here that is false, they keep saying, because they want the jury to believe this, but these guys know it's not true. The idea that your memory is always fresher the closer you are to the events. It's fresher, but your memory is more accurate the closer you are to the events. No, sometimes some parts of your memory are, but some parts of your memory are not. Your memory later on, you're triggered by something. There's something that triggers a memory. So you tell the story of everything that you think happened. You see an accident in front of your house, and you tell the story of everything that you think, and you've told it to the next day. You tell it to the police. You tell it everything you can to the best of your ability to what happened. But then a month later, or 6 months later, or a year later, someone says, "Oh yeah, by the way, I was out walking my dog out there," and maybe you totally forgot that, but then you remember, "Oh shit, that's right, I saw somebody walking my dog," and that triggers some other part of your memory, and you say, "You know what? Now that I remember it, that person walking their dog had to stop because this guy was backing out of his driveway." And so now your memory has suddenly become more accurate than it was the day after. That's because something rekindled, something triggered the memory within. So the idea, so it's not unusual that people are going to go before if someone goes before 5 grand juries, they're going to have 5 slightly different testimonies. It's never going to be exactly the same. There's always going to be some new memory that comes, and that memory may not be more accurate, or it may be more accurate. Memories can be false, but they're not lies. They're false because they're triggered in your mind. You think maybe this happened because you've heard it talked about, and then you think, well, maybe that did happen. So that could have happened with Brian Higgins. Maybe he's heard enough people talk about Ryan Nagel taking a ride from her brother. I'm sorry, Julie Nagel taking a ride from her brother, that maybe she says, maybe later on under memory, he's like, yeah, I remember some guy coming in and picking up her. That's a hypothetical. I'm just throwing that out there. We don't know, but I'm just saying memory it's not that simple. And you're never going to have 5 people watch an accident. They always say you got 10 people watching an accident, you're going to get 10 different versions of what happened. And that's just the way it is. But it's also, if you tell the same story, if I tell a story about a bar fight that Tom Fleming helped me out in, and this has happened back in my bar owning days, I'm going to tell essentially the same story. It's going to be essentially the same every time, but there might be variations Maybe I remember something a little bit different, or maybe the story changes a little bit over time. That's not lying. That's just normal. And Tom, who was right there with me, may remember some things a little bit different. Doesn't mean that he's lying or I'm lying. It's just that's just how memory works. These aren't hypotheticals, Chris. This is I'm explaining how memory works, and I think most of us here understand this. I'm explaining that it's not perjury to have some slight discrepancy in your federal grand jury. You're also in front of a grand jury. You're asked a lot of different questions. You're asked questions over hours. And in a grand jury, you're allowed to be asked questions by the jurors. So the process is going to be different. The questions that you're asked before the federal grand jury are going to be different than the questions you were asked a year earlier in front of the state grand jury. And the whole process is going to be different. So even if you're just being completely honest, there are going to be discrepancies in your testimony. That is not perjury. That's not even meaning, that doesn't even mean that they said something that wasn't true. I'm really kind of surprised that you don't understand that, but I don't know. I guess part of this process is it's so alien. I've already explained this, Angela. So, again, like I said, I know if you're involved in a chat war, you might have missed it, but I addressed as my first example and at length the Katie McLaughlin thing. Katie McLaughlin downplayed a relationship. Why not be honest? I've already given you the reason. So I'm going to say it one more time in very quick version, but please, I'm not going to say it again. So listen. All right. Katie McLaughlin, and as I said, first of all, option A, she's lying because she's part of a cover-up. All right. She's friends of the Alberts and she's willing to frame an innocent person because her loyalty to Caitlin Albert, who she went to high school with and took a couple of trips with, is so strong that she's willing to risk her own freedom because if she's caught in this perjury, she's going to jail, right? She's willing to take that risk because she's so loyal that she's willing, and she's so unethical that she's willing to frame an innocent person. Okay, that's option A. Let's call that option A. But are you willing to look at other options? This is all I want you to do from now on, because I don't think you do this. And I'm sorry, but I don't think I've seen you for a year. I do not think you do this. I do not think most other people in the horde do this. You don't ask the questions. You don't even try, because I'm sure you're an intelligent person. You don't say, what other possible explanation? You shouldn't need me to give you the reason. Can you come up with any other possible explanation as to why Katie McLaughlin might downplay her relationship? Okay, because I can come up with some, but I want you to do it on your own. And I came up with them earlier, and apparently you weren't listening. But Katie McLaughlin has been under persecution for a year by that mob, the zombie horde, the Turtle Rider mob. Brutal attack, personal attack, digging into her background, sending threats. Okay, she has been under that attack. I'm not saying you participated in that, but I believe you hang around with a crew that does and doesn't have a problem with those kind of attacks. If you don't, I apologize. If you're standing up to those people and telling them they shouldn't do it, then thank you. Good on you. But if you don't, you got to live with that. You got to live with that, because this is your chance to do the right thing. And if you didn't do it, you won't get a chance to do it 6 months from now. The 227 search is not proven, and it's insane. I guess I'll go back on in a second, but it gets old. Katie McLaughlin, is it possible that under that 1 year of persecution, she feels like she doesn't want to be the one to blow it for the prosecution? So she minimizes her friendship with Caitlin. That's not a lie. That's minimizing. She didn't say she didn't know Caitlin. If she said she didn't know Caitlin, then that would be a lie. She didn't say that. She said Caitlin is an acquaintance, and nobody has proved otherwise. Just because you somebody found some pictures where 8 years ago Caitlin went on a trip, or 3 years ago Caitlin was at a baby shower that they were both at the same time, that in no way, that doesn't even discredit her testimony. That's by definition what an acquaintance is. Someone you see every couple of years. A friend is someone you have their contact in your phone and you see semi-regularly, and you text or you call. And there's different definitions of what a friend can be, but it's not unreasonable for her to call that an acquaintance. It's not at all unreasonable. So there's no evidence to sit there and say that she lied. And then, frankly, it's not rational to say that. It's not a rational analysis of the evidence of her testimony to say that. Now, enough on that. The 227, do I really need to explain this anymore? It's just not rational to insist that 227 was anything close to a certainty. At most, you might be able to say maybe it was real. That's if you don't really know all the evidence. But if you have looked even enough at the evidence, let's just go over it quickly. Sorry if I'm getting angry, but I get frustrated with this stuff because it's mindless. On the ambulance, Karen told the paramedic, and this has been testified, so if you're paying attention to the trial, you know this. Karen asked the paramedic on the ambulance more or less the same exact question that she asked Jen McCabe. How long does it take to die for hypothermia? That's the testimony. That's in the testimony. Okay? Now, in addition to that, and we haven't seen the experts get up, but we already know we're going to get Ian Whiffen, who is the senior forensic data analyst for Celebrite. That's the software that was used to find this 227. He's going to get up and explain that there was no search for how long to die at the coal at 227. That timestamp is incorrect. He's going to explain why. Just as Jessica Hyde, the elite, highly esteemed, independent data expert from George Mason University, is going to explain the same reason, that it's about a tab that was opened up, that remained open, wasn't closed, and then later on, when Jen went in to make that search at Karen's request at 6:23, that tab was still open. But it records the timestamp from when it was first open. But you can expand on this. Just using logic, people. We already saw it came out under questioning by David Yannetti that only microseconds before that 227 search, Jen McCabe was searching for the basketball scores. Microseconds. That tells you something. She also communicated by text with the coach of the basketball team related to those basketball scores. A coach had invited her daughter to play on the basketball team, and Jen McCabe was researching this. So for you to believe that 227 search for how long that search happened at 227, let me tell you what you have to believe in order to believe that's true. Okay? You have to believe that Jen McCabe got in the car with her husband and two young women who they were given a ride home. And they're going home to their 4 young daughters. And while they're going home, they're knowing that the plan is to leave John, who they've all already assaulted and who was unconscious, and the plan is to leave him to die outside in the cold. You have to think that that's in their heads, both Jen and her husband, that they're going home and they've been told the plan is not to kill John and put him outside, but to leave him outside to die of hypothermia. Now, it's not sensible why anybody would leave John that way. If you want to make sure he's silent, you kill him before you put him out. But you have to believe that that's what they told Jen and told Matt. And the two of these people are going home to their 4 little girls, knowing that they are part of a murder conspiracy, not a cover-up, a murder conspiracy, because at that point, John was still alive. So if you're aware that John is about to be killed, they're about to finish him off, and you don't do anything, that you are an accomplice to murder. Okay? If you are charged with being an accomplice to murder, you're not going to be there to raise your little girls. Your little girls are going to grow up, what, in foster care or something, or raised by another family member, because you're not going to be there. And you're not going to be there for their weddings. You're not going to be there. You may not even see them again because you're going to jail for something close to life for being an accomplice to murder. So you have to believe that those people in that car were willing to take on that risk. Okay? And you say, oh, well, they thought they knew they would get away with it. No, that's crazy. If John had been attacked by a dog and beat up inside the house, everybody knows that there's almost no way to get away with that conspiracy. The medical examiner is going to see the dog bites. They're going to see that he was beat up. So you're Matt and you're Jen, and you're driving home to your 4 little girls knowing that there is a very good chance, there is a probability that if you don't go take action, if you don't go to the police and tell them what's happening, then you're going to jail for the better part of your life, and your kids are going to grow up without their parents. You have to believe. That's what you have to believe. This is not my opinion. That's what you have to believe in order for this conspiracy to make sense. And then you have to believe further that when Jen got home and Matt got home, now Jen's health app data showed that her health rate, her heart rate was completely normal. So you have to believe she's so cold that she feels no anxiety about participating in this murder conspiracy that they're very likely to get caught in. You have to believe that while all that's going on, she actually has the basketball team also on her mind. So at 2:27, she's searching the basketball team. Right before that, she's made a text to the coach. And then microseconds later, which is humanly impossible, but microseconds later, she puts in the search, how long to die in the cold. So, by the way, I'll see how the murder conspiracy is going to go. Just casually doing that. No, that's not saying to believe in that. I'm sorry. I can respect people who question certain parts of this case. I cannot respect that. That's zombie thinking. All right. If you believe that, if after what I just told you, if maybe you weren't able to ask those questions on your own, or maybe you didn't have all that information, but after what I just told you right now, if you still believe that 227 search happened, you're a zombie. And now people, I hate to make problems for Tom saying that, because he does a great job keeping chat civil. But if after what I just said, you believe that a search happened at 227 for how long to die in the cold, then you are suffering from diminished mental capacity. Something's wrong. It's time to get a health check. Seriously, and I've been through a lot of serious health checks. It's time. It's time. If you believe after what I just presented you with, which is all the truth, if you still believe that Jen was making that search at 227, it's time to get a health check, because something isn't working. Everything I just gave you was presented in court. Okay, Kristen says, I don't rely on what you say, but what is presented in court. Just saying. Good. Everything I just gave you was presented in court. Now, look, maybe you have a job and you couldn't see that. Okay, but I don't know what to tell you. I'm giving you evidence. I've watched and covered every minute of the trial, and I'm giving you what was presented in court. What else can I do? Now it's on you to go look it up. Okay, you can find all of the trial on my channel and go back and rewatch it. So you can go back and watch Jen McCabe's testimony and find all that. Why not? Go do it. Because do you want to risk smearing innocent people with murder when the evidence is there and all you have to do is go and look it up to find out that they're innocent? Is that what you want to do? Is that the kind of person you are? I don't think it is. Right? I give you the benefit of the doubt. So good. You don't believe me. You think maybe I'm making something up. Okay, I can live with that. I could be right. You don't know me personally. Go look it up then. Okay? I forget which, maybe people can tell us which is, I don't remember which firefighter testified, but they're a paramedic. They were on the ambulance, and Karen, and he testified. And in fact, I can't even remember if it was a he, but I think it was a he. He testified. Yes, it was a he, because I think Katie was the only woman there, right? And this wasn't Katie's testimony. She was not on the ambulance. So this male paramedic testified that Karen was asking, how long would it take for someone to die outside in hypothermia? That's in the testimony. You can go look it up. But I'm telling you, in fact, when it said it, I pointed it out right in chat as I was watching. Like, there it is. There's the search right there. That's exactly what Karen wanted to see. That's what Jen testified. So then Jen testified when she came up, and she said, when I was put in the car, I went in the car in one of the police cruisers with Karen, right, as they were working on John on the ambulance. So they're trying to revive John on the ambulance, and Karen is freaking out in the car, and she says, how long would it take to die in the cold? And so Jen, her hands cold, nervous, makes that search. Now, I misspell things on my phone all the time. Fingers don't really, just too big for those little buttons, and I misspelled. That's all that happened. You also have the data that was not challenged by the defense. That show the defense does not challenge the fact that Jen made the search for the basketball at the same time. They didn't challenge that. They didn't challenge the fact that Jen said that she texted her coach, and they have Jen's phone, so they know all the texts and all the calls that Jen made. If Jen testified that she had texted the coach of the basketball team that her daughter was going to join, if she had lied about that, the defense would have pointed it out right away. They have that data because remember, she volunteered her phone. They didn't point that out, so it's true. All right, so everything I'm giving you right now is all in the testimony. It's not based on some rumor I heard. So it's not reasonable to believe in the 227 search. It's simply not reasonable. So Keep It Real pointed out there's 259 people so as many people as possible. Click the like. Thank you. Appreciate it. Keep it real. All this, we don't get the kind of support that the Grifter channel gets. Sean is going to be on there. He was on there today with like 3,000 people touting his usual nonsense that never comes true and is disproved every day. And it has a big following because people like the conspiracy. I give you the truth. It's never going to be as popular. So again, I apologize if I sounded heated, but you can look all this stuff up on your own. I'm just giving you the evidence that's been in the court. If I give you something that has not been in trial yet, but I have a source on, I tell you that. I make that distinguishment. So, for instance, when I tell you that I've heard that Officer Kelly Deaver has been meeting a lot with Prosecutor Lally, well, there's no official source on that. So that's something that I have from sources. And that doesn't violate anything, them telling that. It's not like we know the content of their meetings. But that's sourced. So you have to trust my source. I can't point to the trial or to a specific document on that. But I tell you that it's a source, or you can kind of tell common sense wise, it's a source. So, trying to click. Thank you, Andy. Appreciate it. I'm trying, let's see. So Andy made a contribution, much appreciated, and said, Kevin, thank you, you rock. I mean, I want to take it easy, like I just get a little frustrated. Apologize because you see innocent people being smeared. It's just how terrible is it that because somebody, I mean, the moral of the story is never turn over your phone to investigators, no matter how innocent you are. Because the way it works is, so let's say there's a murder across the street and you were in your house all night. You didn't hear it. You don't know anything about it. But the police come over and you're innocent, so you give them your phone. Data is complicated now, and it's growing more and more complicated every day. The software that's used to analyze this stuff is complicated to the point where the people that design the software can't fully predict how it's going to operate. It's not fully predictable. And the software that it's in, so the software itself, in this case, Celebrite, it's analyzing other software, so your Apple software, but that software is also always in flux. So there's no way to ever get it to perfectly match up. And it's just going to get more and more complicated because now you have programs, AI programs like Chat GPT can be used to create the the logarithms for this software to do the coding. So it's just going to get harder and harder. So if you have an unscrupulous defense team, they will always be able to find some little tiny piece of information in your phone to take out of context and make it seem. It doesn't mean that data analysis is not effective. But you have to have honest data analysis. So to have honest data analysis, you have to have an analyst go in and get all of the data and do a true analysis of it. Rich Green of the defense is not paid to do that. He is paid to find something the defense can use. Doesn't mean he's lying. Doesn't have to lie. He's not going to lie for them. But what he's going to do is he's going to run the software, and as soon as it comes up with something that the defense can use to create any kind of reasonable doubt, he stops his analysis right there. He has no reason to look at any other analysis because he's done his job. I'll be curious to see if Rich Green actually testifies. If he does testify, I'll be curious how that questioning goes, if the prosecution is allowed to ask him any questions like that, if he submits any opinion. But if any opinion he gives damages the defense's case, he's going to lose tens of thousands of dollars because these guys become professional testifiers. You have medical examiners that do that. You have former doctors that no longer practice that do that, and they make a lot of money. I've been on juries that that's exactly what happens. There was a doctor that testified about the injuries, and the plaintiff asked, no, the defendant asked, I'm sorry, how often have you testified? This was somebody suing somebody else. How often have you testified in the last 2 years? And it was like something like 18 times. He's a professional testifier. Now, I don't know if that's the case with Rich Green, but that pretty much is. This is a guy who's making his living, getting paid to work for Alan Jackson. So it's something that people have to understand. That's how the American trial system works. All right, guys. So it's getting late, and we have to be on this early for tomorrow morning. And it's going to be a big day. I think they're going to 4:30, and we're going to hear from CERT team experts. So everybody have a good. Oh, about the Celtics, I predict it's going to be a great series, Jason. At this point, I'm not even making any predictions who will win. I do. The Celtics were 4-0 against Dallas this season in the regular season, and they match up well with them because they have two of the better defensive guards. So in Derek White and the point guard in Drew Holiday. Now, Dallas is a team that their main two players are guards, and Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. And they're ball-centric guards. They like the ball in their hands a lot. So the Celtics match up well with them because they have two of the best defensive guards in the league. But, Doncic is, Kyrie Irving's playing the best that I've ever seen him play as a supporting cast member. And Doncic, as everybody knows, is the guy that is on a mission and can pull out a lot of stuff at the end of a game. The Celtics, that's a part of the game where they struggle with, is guys who can make those kind of shots. So it's worth, it's going to be a good series. And I do think Dallas has some interesting athletic big guys in the middle that can create some problems on defense. Elaine said, thank you for all your knowledge and wisdom. You're the first YouTube channel I watched. Oh, wow. I love YouTube. I think I watch that more than anything else. And she says, I have learned most of what I know from you. Well, I doubt that. And I learned a lot from Kate Peter. So thank you to Kate, but I also have many other sources that I can't thank them publicly, but if you're listening, I'm thanking you. And then I read the documents and do my own analysis, as everybody knows. And so appreciate it. Tomorrow, the trial is back. Gonna be a long day, more than likely. Be on Court TV tomorrow night, and so it's a day I gotta keep caffeinated all day.